Chapter 673. Fishing is a very tiring activity, at least in Jiang Hai's opinion. After 2 nets of fish, including Jiang Hai, they were already a little tired, but they were still very excited. Boss, do you know? Canadians don't catch fish as tiring as we do. Picking up a cigarette and putting it in his mouth, Tommy Charles, an old cowboy who has been to many places, couldn't help but say with a smile. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was really attracted. How do Canadians fish? Looking at him, Jiang Hai also asked as he wished. Jiang Hai knows that Americans and Canadians are born to be quite incompatible. Americans don't like Canadians. The Canadians disliked the Americans even more. It was said that Canada discriminated against the Chinese, but in some areas, they hated the Americans even more than the Chinese. Officially, the 2 countries were united, but in private, the friction between them was not small. Canadians catch fish the same way we do, but they throw the fish directly into the cold storage instead of sorting them out like we do. That way, their workload will be much smaller. But you all know that, so when you buy seafood in Canada, you have to be careful. They might stuff half a basket of seaweed into a basket of fish. Looking at Jiang Hai, Tommy Charles couldn't help but laugh. Hearing his words, everyone on the boat also laughed. Of course, they all knew that this was nonsense. Because Canada was vast and sparsely populated, they didn't have that many people. Generally speaking, when they fish, they directly put the fish into the freezer, then tidy up the fish nets, and then go to the freezer to sort out the fish. This can be said to have advantages and disadvantages. The advantage is that it will speed up the speed of picking fish to prevent the fish from dying after they come out of the water. The disadvantage is that picking fish in the cold storage, it feels particularly cool, especially in this season. In a burst of laughter, the 3rd net of fish was put down. He had to admit that the fishing resources in the Jiang Hai fishing ground were really rich. Although these fish had not grown to their maximum size, to be honest, they were not small. At least they could be sold. 1 net at a time, there was almost no shortage of fish. Almost every time the net went down, at least 5 tons of fish could be caught. Of course, there were all kinds of fish. So Jiang Hai and the others still need to sort. They were busy until noon, and Jiang Hai and the others had already caught 5 nets of fish. A total of more than 20 tons were received, of which the number of American redfish was the largest. Of course, this thing was also the most stocked at the beginning. A total of about 9 tons. This kind of fish is sold on the market for a pound of good fish. Of course, it refers to fish as big as Jiang Hai caught. It is not a problem to sell it for $10 a pound. Even if the cod grows into a monster, it is impossible for it to sell for $10 a pound. Of course, the wholesale price is definitely not that high. It is about $5 a pound, and a kilogram is about $8 to $10. This depends on the price in the market, but Jiang Hai is still very confident. He believes that not only is his fish big, but it should also taste much better than the average American redfish. Even if it is $10 a kilogram, 9 tons is $90,000. There are also 11 tons of other fish, including 1 ton of the anchovies, which is $20 a kilogram, and these fish are worth $20,000. 2 tons of grouper, which is $20 a kilogram, and these are worth $40,000. 3 tons of salmon, which is $30 a kilogram, and these are worth $90,000. There were also more than 2 tons of miscellaneous fish. Even if they weren't very valuable, they were about the same as redfish in the United States. Altogether, the fish were worth about $250,000. Although it wasn't as much as a cow, it wasn't a small sum of money either. Alright boss, it's noon. Let's get some food and rest. Looking at the time, everyone has been busy since 7 o'clock in the morning. It is almost 1 o'clock now. They were too excited about catching fish, so they have already calmed down. Edward Anderson could not help but speak to Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment, and then felt a little hungry. Alright everyone rest. Jiang Hai has never been a boss who does not empathize with his subordinates, because he knows that what Edward Anderson said must be the thoughts of these people. He did not say much, and waved his hand, telling everyone to rest and eat. Hearing Jiang Hai say eat, Tommy Charles immediately took out the stove. Then Edward Anderson and the others did not stay idle. They went to clean up the octopus and squid that Jiang Hai just caught. Although these octopus and squid were the smallest species, even the smallest species. However, even the smallest species had changed after eating his seaweed. Not only had it become bigger, but its meat quality had also become firmer. Edward Anderson had recently become very fond of making teppanyaki squid. This was what he had learned from Little Ya. He would brush it with Mexican chili sauce. It was sweet and spicy, but not too salty. It could perfectly suppress the fishy smell of the squid, but it still tasted very good. While they were cooking, Jiang Hai did not stay idle. He went to slice a few small Spanish mackerels and roasted them. This kind of fish had fewer bones and more meat. Jiang Hai liked this kind of fish very much, but the production of this kind of fish was not small, and the price was not high. Soon, the things that Jiang Hai and the others were almost done. Tommy Charles was still very good at dealing with people. He first got the biggest squid and handed it to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai did not stand on ceremony and took a big bite after receiving it. He had to admit that Jiang Hai's spiritual energy was really omnipotent. Even if it was just the taste of the squid, it was still quite good. As soon as the squid tentacles entered his mouth, the gravy instantly filled Jiang Hai's mouth. The fresh taste of the squid, coupled with the taste of the chili sauce, Jiang Hai was not bragging. With this skill, he could directly set up a roadside stall. Eating this delicious grilled squid, Jiang Hai could not help but give everyone a thumbs up. This kind of game was indeed a rare delicacy. Looking at Jiang Hai's actions, Edward Anderson and the others also laughed. In fact, Edward Anderson and the others had long been tired of eating things in the sea. After all, they had been doing this for half their lives. They really had no interest in the things in the sea. But to be honest, every time they ate the fish in Jiang Hai's manner, it felt really good. At least they were not tired of eating it yet. Naturally, they had to drink beer while eating barbecue. A box of iced Corona was pushed out. Jiang Hai and the others did not stand on ceremony. After opening it, they drank it. The taste of Corona was very refreshing, but to be honest, foreign beer, because of the high alcohol content, was more or less bitter. However, whether it was clear beer or Corona, it had to be accompanied by lemon. After eating a mouthful of lemon and drinking a mouthful of beer, they would feel that the beer was not bitter, but sweet. Then, they ate it with grilled squid and grilled mackerel. The taste was quite good. When going to sea, lemons and the like were naturally indispensable. First, it was to supplement nutrition. Second, lemons could actually happen. Of course, this had nothing to do with Jiang Hai for the time being. As the sun set, Jiang Hai stood on the deck, looking at the gradually sinking sun in the distance. He also smiled. This afternoon, they caught 6 more nets. The harvest of each net was actually about the same. After 6 nets, Jiang Hai's fishing boat's cabin was filled to the brim. Not only was the ice storage full, even the ice storage was also full. Although these fish weren't too expensive, these fish alone were worth at least 500,000 yuan. This referred to the price of selling at the fishing port. If Jiang Hai had a retail channel, the price would be even higher. Jiang Hai's people did not say that they would stop after fishing once. There were many schools of fish in this area. According to Edward Anderson, they could fish every other day, and the harvest would be the same every time. They could fish until winter came in October. Then, they would look at the problem of fish in the waters and decide whether to bring them in or not. There were a total of 8 months between now and the beginning of October. According to a rough calculation, there were at least 240 days left, which was half of the time to fish. That was 120 days. Excluding storms and the like, there were still 90 days left. 90 days, $500,000 a day. That meant that Jiang Hai could earn $45 million just from these ordinary fish. According to Edward Anderson, it could only be more, not less, and this was only based on the calculation of the American redfish. After all, there were still precious fish species such as dragonfly, grouper, and salmon. Jiang Hai also remembered that there were many lobsters, king crabs, spotted shrimps, large yellow croakers, and Yangtze swordfish at the bottom of the sea. There was no need to think about the Chinese bahabas. In the next few years, Jiang Hai would not touch them. In addition, he also had a batch of bluefin golden spears. If he sold these things, he would be able to earn a lot. 45 million? Adding a zero to the end was more like it. Although it still could not be compared to the price of beef. After all, beef should have a price tag. As long as ordinary cattle were raised to grade 5A, they could also be sold for the same price. However, these fish were different. No matter how delicious the American redfish was, a kilogram was still about $10. Even if it was extremely delicious, the price would still be the same. After all, the bloodline of the American redfish was still there. Just because the American redfish was better than ordinary bluefin golden spears, it did not mean that one could sell for the same price as bluefin golden spears. There were rules in the market, and the price was set by Jiang Hai. However, Jiang Hai was satisfied. After all, he only spent $280 million to buy this manor, and these fish could bring him more than $400 million in income in a year. After deducting the taxes, he could earn back his capital in a year. In fact, he had already earned back his capital long ago. After all, he had collected more than $1 billion from the cattle. With income, the mentality of the fishermen had changed. At least, they were a lot more upright. And they could also look forward to Jiang Hai's year-end bonus during this year's Chinese New Year. It would probably be very good. Boss, we are about to reach Boston. Because Jiang Hai's house did not have a warehouse to store fish, Jiang Hai and the others were preparing to sell the fish they caught today directly at night. There was only one largest and fairest fishing company in the vicinity, Michelson Greens. So after Jiang Hai and the others decided to sell, they had already set off for Boston. Oh, I got it. Looking at the port on the sea level in the distance, Jiang Hai also responded. He couldn't help but stand up and go back to the cabin to put on his equipment. Although he was the boss, he would also help when there was a shortage of manpower. It was said that it would be very tiring to forget the mountain and set sail at the port. Jiang Hai and the others drove for more than an hour before they arrived at the port. After arriving at the port, Jiang Hai found that there were not many fishing boats here. After all, there was not much fish in Boston, and the weather was so cold now. This was really not a good season for fishing. When Jiang Hai's boat came over, many people noticed the fishing boat with the words, Soaring Dragon, painted on it, Hua Xia. Everyone in the vicinity knew that this ship belonged to Jiang Hai. If there was a large amount of fish in the vicinity, then it could only be Jiang Hai's ship. Therefore, they wanted to see how much fish Jiang Hai had. Jiang Hai's ship was a ship that had a lot of fish. As for what kind of thoughts they harbored, no one knew. Whether or not they were preparing to do something sneaky, no one knew. But Jiang Hai was not afraid of them stealing fish, because his fish were not so easy to steal. He might be afraid of coming to a warship, but to an ordinary fishing boat, Jiang Hai could only laugh. Do you think Big Fool and Roger are vegetarians? Hey, let's see who's here. Jiang Hai, it's almost time for your fishing ground to open. Are you here to sell today? After entering the port, Jiang Hai saw Michelson Green, who was collecting fish from a distance. At this time, the old man came over with a smile on his face. Your guess is really accurate. How is the current market? Hearing his words, it wasn't the first time they had dealt with each other. Jiang Hai didn't want to talk nonsense with him. They weren't friends or anything, so he directly asked him. It's on the board. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Michelson Green smiled and pointed to a sign hanging next to him. The price of common fish was written on it. The top one was codfish, Atlantic codfish. This fish is very expensive in China, but it is not worth much in the United States. 1. $8 per kilogram, followed by herring, 1. $85 per kilogram, then sardines, 1. $9 per kilogram. Mackerel, 3. $4 per kilogram, 2. $7 per kilogram, mackerel, 3. $1 per kilogram. Redfish, 8. $6 per kilogram for more than 40 centimeters, 6. $3 per kilogram between 40 centimeters and 30 centimeters per kilogram. Grouper, tiger spot, $20 per kilogram, $45 per kilogram, $20 per kilogram, $15 per kilogram, $28 per kilogram, 3. $6 per kilogram, albacore tuna, 8. $7 per kilogram. Looking at the price, Jiang Hai couldn't help but frown. This price is a bit low. Chapter 674. Why is the price so low? Before Jiang Hai could say anything, Edward Anderson couldn't help but walk down the boat and ask Michelson Green. He was very unwilling to accept this price. He originally thought that this boat of fish could be sold for at least $500,000. But if he sold it at this price, it would be at least $50,000 less, which was something he was extremely unwilling to accept. I don't have a choice. Michelson shrugged helplessly when he heard Edward Anderson's words. You're also an old fisherman. It's impossible that you don't know. We didn't set this price. I'm also following the price in New York. This is the price set by those bastards on Wall Street. If you think it's low, then I think it's low too. Looking at Edward Anderson, Michelson Green took out a pack of cigarettes and lit one up. In the United States, there was no fixed price. In fact, there was no fixed price in China. But in China, the government would regulate these things, which was much better than in the United States. Whenever the price of something increased, such as some necessities like rice, it would only increase within a certain range. Therefore, those who raised the price were all non-necessities, such as garlic, green onions, coriander, and so on. With these years of supervision, the domestic price growth was still very reliable. This was also the best thing about the country. But in the United States, there was no such regulation. In the United States, all prices were set by those capitalists. It was the big bosses on Wall Street who were in charge of setting the price of vegetables, grains, meat, and even forage. The price was whatever they said. For example, if these guys didn't like the special 5A grade beef, they would say that from today onwards, the price of 5A grade beef would be reduced to $1 per kilogram. Then, the price would really be reduced to $1 per kilogram. Of course, $1 per kilogram could only be bought after one bought it. Even if the price was reduced to this level, the people who had 5A grade beef, such as Jiang Hai, wouldn't sell it to Huaxia or Europe. It was the Americans who didn't want to eat it. It had nothing to do with them. Of course, they couldn't drop the price so ridiculously. It was possible to raise or lower the price by $1, but it was impossible for the price to drop to $1. Jiang Hai's manor basically didn't deal with these people, because he didn't sell ordinary beef, his wine was brewed by himself, and his grass didn't need to be imported, so whether these people set the price or not had nothing to do with Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai was taking the high-end route, and these people could not restrict him. However, the current price of fish made Jiang Hai a little depressed. Those damn vampires. Boss, are they for sale? Upon hearing Michelson Green's words, Edward Anderson hesitated for a moment before asking Jiang Hai. He knew that since the price was set, it meant that he couldn't persuade Michelson to give them more money. So now the only choice is to sell or not to sell. Jiang Hai thought for a moment and couldn't help but sigh. Although he also felt that the price was a little low, he had to sell it. He didn't have a warehouse to store these fish, and most importantly, he hadn't found the next buyer. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smack his lips. Even if he sold it, he couldn't wait for it to stink. Sell it. As soon as Jiang Hai's voice fell, Michelson Green led his sailors to the ship. Boxes of fish were pushed out in front of the onlookers. Seeing that there were so many fish in Jiang Hai's fish farm, everyone couldn't help but gasp. They knew that Jiang Hai raised fish, but they didn't expect there to be so many of them. After pushing the fish out, Michelson Green took out a small knife, picked up an American red fish, and then cut it open. Blood flowed out of the fish's belly in an instant. Then he took a closer look. Jiang Hai knew that he was checking the parasites and what the fish ate. When he found that the fish's stomach was full of grass seeds and other things, and there was no feed at all, he couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Then he cut open a few other fish and other kinds of fish. He even sliced the meat of salmon and grouper and ate them raw. Seeing him eating raw, Jiang Hai couldn't stand it. He didn't eat raw things. However, to him, the sashimi was undoubtedly very delicious. He even smacked his lips after eating it. Hey, to be honest, the quality of the fish here is like this, Michelson Green said while giving a thumbs up. The fish here are fresh and sweet. To be honest, the taste of the American red fish is not worse than that of the yellowfin tuna. But unfortunately, I only collect fish here. Your fish really can't be sold at a high price here. Mickelson Green sighed helplessly and said with some relief. Fortunately, Jiang Hai didn't have any connections. Otherwise, it wouldn't be his turn to catch these fish. It's good that you know. You got it. Wait. Hearing this guy's words, Jiang Hai rolled his eyes at him and then said with a little heartache. He felt that his fish had been sold at a cheap price. Thinking about it, he really felt a little reluctant. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mickelson Green immediately commanded his men to weigh the fish. After the boxes of fish were weighed, they were sent to their warehouse. Edward Anderson and the others also recorded the weight of these people. Jiang Hai sat next to the dock with some depression, looking at the sea outside. If his fish were sold at such a cheap price, he would be a little unwilling, but how could he make these fish more valuable? Or should he raise them for another year before selling them? This was truly a troublesome matter. Just as Jiang Hai was in a daze, his phone suddenly rang. Listening to the ringtone, Jiang Hai picked it up and glanced at it. He found that the caller was none other than Prawalton, whom he hadn't seen since they parted in New York last time. However, she still called him every now and then. Coupled with the previous incident, the relationship between the two of them became even closer. He heard that since the last time he forced her to abdicate, Prawalton's position in the Walma Group became more and more unbreakable. But in the past, she should be regarded as a direct descendant of her father, but now she was independent. She did not belong to any faction. As for the company, let her father and her uncle fight for it. It was precisely because of this neutrality that neither her uncle nor her father could touch her. She was very safe. This was like some countries in Europe. They had no ambition and had always been neutral. So even if the sky was broken outside, these countries would not be invaded. She was now a neutral figure in the Walmart Group. Taking advantage of this opportunity, she replaced the people of other forces in Sam's Club. Now Sam's Club was owned by her. Seeing that it was her call, Jiang Hai didn't think much and picked it up directly. Why are you calling me at this time? Isn't it usually at night? Are you off work now? Picking up the phone, Jiang Hai smiled and asked Prawalton over there. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton over there couldn't help laughing. When I want to get off work, who can control me? Really, but you are right. I haven't gotten off work at this time, and calling you at this time is also because of business. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Prawalton couldn't help but say with a smile. It could be seen that the conversation between her and Jiang Hai was extremely relaxed. Business. Hearing that it turned out to be because of business, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be a little surprised. What business can she find me for? Well, business. You are going to the New York Beef Show in April, right? Looking at Jiang Hai, Prawalton said to Jiang Hai. Yeah. This is not news. Although Jiang Hai's beef is now in short supply, he still wants to make his brand known. If one day, the Walmart Group no longer buys his beef, what will he do? So he can't give the initiative to others. It's best to go out and make a name for himself. So Jiang Hai decided to go to the beef show this year. Anyway, it's not very troublesome, just a few days. Don't go to New York, go to Texas. Hearing that Jiang Hai is really going to participate, Prawalton said directly to Jiang Hai. Texas? Texas, huh? It's not good. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai said hesitantly. What's wrong? Texas is the core of the ranching industry in the United States. No, the entire world. They'll be holding the National Beef Cattle Competition in April. If your cattle can win the gold medal in this competition, your reputation will be even greater. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Prawalton couldn't help but ask with some doubts. In fact, Jiang Hai's reputation is a good thing for her. Apart from her private relationship with Jiang Hai, she is the owner of Jiang Hai's club. If the reputation of Jiang Hai Manor is known, then the brand effect of her monopolizing the beef in Jiang Hai Manor will also be reflected. At that time, she can raise the price, which is what she is most interested in. She is not satisfied with just selling Jiang Hai's beef at 5A grade. She wants to make more money, so she has to make Jiang Hai's name known. but listening to Jiang Hai's words, he doesn't seem to want to go. To be honest, I don't have a good impression of Texas. When Jiang Hai first came to the United States, he went to Texas. In his impression, the people of Texas are not very hospitable people. The proportion of white people in Texas is probably the highest among all the states in the United States. The people of Texas are quite xenophobic, and maybe because many of them are cowboys, they are very vulgar. They will often curse at other people on the street. If you dare to talk back, they will dare to hit you. Racial feelings are quite strong in this state. In this state, almost 99% of the cowboys are white. There are 1 or 2 South Americans and black people, but they are basically gathered in the ranches of black people or Latin Americans. So Jiang Hai really doesn't have a good impression of Texas. The second reason why he doesn't want to go is because of the cattle. To go there for the exhibition, you have to bring the cattle, but how do you get the cattle? Take a car? It's not very safe. Jiang Hai doesn't know how to get there by plane. He feels that it is not very reliable. In this case, how to get there is a big problem. Is that so? Actually, you don't have to worry about the first point. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Pralton can't help but smile and say. She naturally knows Jiang Hai's temper and what the people of Texas are like, but she naturally has her reasons for letting Jiang Hai go. The National Beef Festival is in San Antonio. This time, the National Beef competition will be held in San Antonio. You know San Antonio, the city where the NBA Spurs are located. This city is not a metropolitan area, and the market is small, but the urban area itself is not small, and the population is quite large. You said that Texans have racial discrimination. I am also very clear about it, but it also depends on the place. The people near Dallas are more serious, like Houston and San Antonio are much better. Houston is a space city, so most of the people are foreigners, and there is no such thing, and the people in San Antonio are famous for their good temper. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Pulla Walton explained to him. As for the problem you mentioned about the cattle not being able to get there, I can help you. Our group has a lot of planes. It is not a problem to get one to send your cattle there, and those people are all professionals. Don't worry, they won't make your cattle uncomfortable. Then okay. Hearing Pralton's words, Jiang Hai's heart, which was still a little shaken, gradually sank. He really doesn't have any opinions, but at least he knows that Pralton will not harm him. Since she said there is no problem, then he also wants to make some reputation, so he decided to go to Texas in April this year. By the way, where are you now? Why is it so noisy? After finishing the business, Pralton remembered to ask Jiang Hai. Me, I'm selling fish in Boston. Looking at the people around him, it was really noisy, Jiang Hai said to Pralton. Selling fish? Did you get fish in your fishery? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Pralton was stunned on the other side of the phone. Yeah, I've already got fish and the output is not low. Thinking of the fish in his fishery, Jiang Hai couldn't help but say with a smile. Oh my God, you didn't even tell me that your fish are mine. I'll go there tomorrow. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Pralton couldn't help but shout loudly on the other side of the phone. Those fish, she knows, are treasures. Chapter 675. You're here. Looking at the sports car driving into his manor, Jiang Hai couldn't help but walk out of the villa and say to the person in the sports car with a smile. Are you renovating your place? After parking the car in the newly repaired parking lot, Pralton got out of the car and looked at the road that was still under construction in the distance. She couldn't help but ask strangely. Now the parking lot was almost finished, and cars could be parked here. At present, the construction team was extending the road outward. Materials and other things were pushed everywhere, and it looked a little dilapidated. Yeah, otherwise, it would be too troublesome to clear the snow in winter, so I added a cover. Hearing Pralton's words, Jiang Hai also said with a smile. At this time, the door of the front passenger seat opened, and a person who surprised Jiang Hai came out from inside. This person was none other than Cheryl Lee, the woman who once had some unclear relationship with Jiang Hai and Pralton. When Pralton was in trouble, she came to inform him. Otherwise, Jiang Hai wouldn't know. At this time, the two people came out together. After seeing Jiang Hai, he also smiled and waved at Jiang Hai. Pralton had always been in a hurry. After talking to Jiang Hai yesterday, Jiang Hai knew that she would come over very early today, so he deliberately didn't go out or fish. But to be honest, Jiang Hai really didn't want to sell the fish. It was really too cheap. Originally, he thought that yesterday's fish could be sold for $500,000, but in the end, it only sold for $430,000. He lost $70,000 of fish, but it wasn't cheap. Originally, Jiang Hai's fish was much more delicious than ordinary fish. If he sold it at the price of ordinary fish, it was indeed a loss. Come in. After greeting the two, Jiang Hai walked into the villa, followed by Pralton and Cheryl Lee. As soon as they entered the house, they were surprised to find that none of Jiang Hai's women were at home. Where are your girls? Don't say that you are now alone, they finally can't stand you? After looking back and forth and confirming that there was no one else in the villa, Pralton couldn't help but say with a smile, "Isn't it time to pluck seeds?" They all went to the greenhouse. Now the only person in the house who is free is me. Shrugging his shoulders, Jiang Hai said to Pralton. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Pralton's eyes couldn't help but light up. Since there's no one else, that's good. Hearing that she was the only one in Jiang Hai's house, Pralton couldn't help but smile and walk to him. In an instant, she took off her coat and threw it aside. Then, under Jiang Hai's gaze, she took off the tight shirt under her coat, revealing the purple-red vest inside. Hey, no way, it's still daytime. Looking at Pralton's movements, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile bitterly. He knew how terrifying this woman was when she went crazy. When they were in the hotel, they didn't go out for several days. Don't talk nonsense, you have so many girls to use every day, I don't have a man. Now that we meet, why don't you satisfy me? Pushing Jiang Hai to sit on the sofa, Pralton sat directly in front of Jiang Hai. Under Jiang Hai's gaze, she directly untied her vest. Looking at the indescribable things that popped out in front of him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile bitterly. Really? Two hands instantly stroked the two indescribable things that popped out, Jiang Hai asked tentatively. Of course. Hurry up, don't let me wait, they miss you very much. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Pralton couldn't help but smile and nod. Then she picked up her hands, pressed Jiang Hai's hands, and pinched the indescribable things into different shapes. She also lowered her head and kissed Jiang Hai's mouth. As their tongues chased each other, the atmosphere in the room also changed. Good, the two lips separated. Pralton smiled with her blurred eyes, then stood up, took off the armor on her lower body, and began to disarm Jiang Hai. Before Jiang Hai could do anything else, Cheryl Lee also came over. Her hands immediately cupped Jiang Hai's cheeks, and then her lips began to repeat Pralton's movements. In fact, she also wanted to, but there were some things that she couldn't say. After all, she and Pralton were Pralton's priority. Recently, she found that Pralton's attitude towards men and women had changed a little, although she still hated men. But she had a lot of opinions about Jiang Hai. Even in their conversations, they often talked about Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai's beef, Jiang Hai's home, Jiang Hai's character, and Jiang Hai's things. Women, just like men gathered together to talk about women, women gathered together to talk about men. Pralton especially liked to talk about Jiang Hai. But she knew that it was impossible for her and Jiang Hai to be together. Jiang Hai was unlikely to be with her. But this didn't prevent her from liking Jiang Hai. Even since the last time she came back from New York, the things between them had become less and less, and she wasn't as active as before. But today, she seemed to have seen her former self. Not to mention Pralton, in fact, Cheryl Lee already missed Jiang Hai very much. The last time she came, she wanted to sleep with Jiang Hai. First, it was to repay Jiang Hai's kindness for helping Pralton. Second, it was also for her own desire. But at that time, Jiang Hai was drained by Pralton. In a situation where she wanted to do it, but she was powerless, nothing happened between them. Now that she saw such an opportunity, she wouldn't let it go. She immediately took the initiative, and Jiang Hai felt the initiative of the two. His nerves, which were still persevering, also relaxed. For some things, once it happened once, there would be a second time, a third time, a fourth time. He, Cheryl Lee, and Prowalton had done it more than 3 or 4 times. Naturally, he was familiar with it. As the two slowly slid down and argued, Jiang Hai was also prepared. Looking at the giant beast in front of him, Prowalton licked the saliva from the corner of his mouth, and then sat on it with satisfaction. The war was about to start. Did you sell the fish yesterday? Half an hour later, Prowalton was defeated. He weakly gave up his seat and leaned in Jiang Hai's arms. Cheryl Lee took over. After resting for more than 10 minutes, Prowalton rubbed Cheryl Lee's upper body and said to Jiang Hai, "Yeah, I sold it for 430,000. While feeling Cheryl Lee, Jiang Hai said to Prowalton. At the same time, his hand wrapped around her neck and kept rubbing her upper body. This feeling was really comfortable. You're really a spendthrift. According to Hua Xia's saying, you're recklessly wasting natural resources. Do you know that? Those fish of yours, I can sell them for at least $1 million. Prowalton glanced at Jiang Hai. She didn't care much about Jiang Hai's private life, but Jiang Hai was wasting money like this. She had to say something. She was a businesswoman. Money was very important to her. You didn't say you wanted it. Hiss, I can't. Jiang Hai patted Prowalton's upper body, causing some indescribable things to sway constantly. While satisfying the visual stimulation, Jiang Hai also felt the changes in Cheryl. Feeling Jiang Hai's movements, Cheryl also leaned on Jiang Hai's body and said weakly, I can't do it either. Hearing this, Jiang Hai carried Cheryl Lee and put her on the sofa. What happened next was needless to say. With Jiang Hai's thrusts, 5 minutes later, as Jiang Hai's body arched, Cheryl also unconsciously opened her mouth wide, but she didn't cry out. After the irritation in his body subsided, Jiang Hai hugged her and lay down on the sofa again. His head rested on Prowalton's thigh. The three of them were panting loudly. Since I'm here this time, do you have time in the afternoon? I'll go see if your fish farm is rich or not. I'll see how much I can order then. Also, prepare some fish for me. I want to go back and test it. Prowalton touched the sweat on Jiang Hai's forehead and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai naturally nodded. This was what he should do. At this time, Cheryl also got up and lay down again. She cleaned up the dirty things she made. Then, the three of them went to take a bath together. Cheryl and Prowalton also specially brushed their teeth. After everything was done, it was already noon. The three of them got dressed and had lunch first. Then, Jiang Hai called Edward Anderson and told him to prepare the boat to go out to sea. Because this time it was an inspection, Jiang Hai didn't drive a small boat. Although they didn't have many people, they still drove a big boat because only a big boat would have positioning sonar. After boarding the boat, Prowalton stayed in the steering room. Sam's Club mainly sold high-quality ingredients, so she had some understanding of these things. For example, during the New York beef show, her vision was very sharp. Although she wasn't the most professional expert, at least she knew everything about beef and fish. She knew more than Jiang Hai. She stared at the sonar to see the situation of the fish in Jiang Hai's manner. Feelings were feelings, business was business. Prowalton did this, and Jiang Hai also wanted her to do this. This way he could live more freely. While she was looking at the fish, Jiang Hai and Cheryl Lee ran to the deck and sat directly on the bow. They chatted while blowing the sea breeze. It seemed that since she came to ask for help last time, their relationship had become much closer. I heard that you went home a while ago. Did you just come back? Cheryl Lee touched the iron railing in front of her and said to Jiang Hai, I've been back for half a month. I don't remember the details, but I've been back for a while. After thinking about it, Jiang Hai came back in early March, and now it's almost late March. So, home, it's a good word, but where is my home? Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Cheryl Lee couldn't help but support her sharp chin, looked at the sea in the distance, and muttered to herself. Your home? If it's not Prowalton, then it's South Korea. It depends on what you think. If you want, my place can also be your home. Hearing Cheryl Lee's words, Jiang Hai also said with a smile. Tisi, you have so many women around you. Aren't you afraid of being squeezed into scum? Cheryl Lee said to Jiang Hai with a smile. It doesn't matter. I've provoked so many women. In fact, in most people's eyes, I'm probably scum. After thinking about it, it seems that I really have too many women. It's really not good to do this. You still know. However, although you are a scumbag, you are not a bad scumbag. At least in my opinion, you are indeed not bad. You can create a sense of home for the people around you, although your love can't only be for one person. Cheryl Lee gently leaned her head on Jiang Hai's shoulder. If Jiang Hai didn't have so many messy things to do, maybe he would really be a good home. But is it really good for people like me to talk about home? With a self-deprecating smile, Cheryl Lee felt that it's not bad to be Jiang Hai's lover. If I'm too greedy, then who knows if my beautiful life will continue. Actually, if you want to go back to China, you should go. After all, you are a very important person to Prawalton. If you always have a psychological problem, it won't be good for you and her. Moreover, I also care about you, don't I? Looking at Cheryl Lee, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee couldn't help but tilt her head and smile gently. Yes, there are still people who care about me, Jiang. I have to admit that I really didn't expect your fishing resources to be so rich in this morning. But at this moment, Prawalton walked out of the cabin, then looked at Jiang Hai with a look of contempt. He sat down beside Jiang Hai and said to him, "Is it okay? I'm a genius in the aquaculture industry." Hearing Prawalton's words, Jiang Hai said with a smile, "The fish here, whether it's the species or the population, are quite good. Now we have to see how the quality of the meat is. If your meat quality is good, I think I can help you spread the name of your Manners fish." Looking at Jiang Hai, Prawalton said to him mysteriously. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also looked at her doubtfully. Her idea? What is it? Chapter 676. Let's catch some fish. Looking at Jiang Hai's puzzled eyes, Prawalton smiled and patted Jiang Hai's shoulder. Then she stood up and began to instruct Edward Anderson and the others to catch fish. But it was different from yesterday. At that time, they were catching fish in schools. But now, they were catching fish for inspection. Therefore, they didn't encounter any schools of fish and had already thrown the net into the sea. While running, they collected all kinds of fish. About an hour later, Edward Anderson saw that the pressure in the net was almost enough, so he used the turbine to pull the net up. As the net came ashore, countless fish appeared in front of everyone. Yesterday, they caught fish for sale, so there weren't many kinds of fish. Basically, they were caught according to schools of fish. All in all, there were only about 10 types of fish. But today was different. As the net of fish was pulled up, Jiang Hai couldn't help but exclaim, "Wow!" because there were so many fish, not in terms of quality, but in terms of quantity. The total weight of these fish was about 2 tons, but there were at least dozens of kinds of fish. There were about 20 kinds of fish from the bream family and scorpion family. These 2 kinds of fish didn't have a large population, but there were many kinds of fish. When Jiang Hai was diving, he often found these kinds of fish. These kinds of fish often formed a school of 3 or 5. Just in Jiang Hai's fish farm, there might be no less than 50 kinds of fish. For example, the bream family, such as green bream, silver bream, white-eye bream, Irish bream, softmouth bream, and so on. The scorpion family was the same. There were 50 kinds of fish in the scorpion family. Although Jiang Hai didn't have all of them, it wasn't too far off. These fishes usually wandered around. This time, Jiang Hai scooped up all the fishes. In addition to these 2 families of fish, there were other kinds of fish, such as redfish, grouper, salmon, barracuda, mackerel, and so on. There were also a lot of these fish in Jiang Hai's fishing grounds. There were also a lot of cod and haddock that were caught. In addition to fish, there were also many squid, small octopus, and herring that leaked out through the mesh. However, what surprised Jiang Hai was the presence of some small eels. These eels were something that Jiang Hai had seen before when he was diving. However, he really hadn't noticed it before. Now that he mentioned it, Jiang Hai also noticed these fish. This is a 7-gilled eel? Looking at the eel in front of them, the others didn't have any reaction. Prawalton screamed first, and then her eyes began to shine. Hearing her scream, Tommy Charles and the others also came over. Well, it is indeed an 8-eyed eel. Our production of this thing is not too high here. I didn't expect there to be a lot. Pulling out the eel from the mesh, Tommy Charles said with some surprise. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was even more puzzled. 7-gilled eel, also known as 8-eyed eel. You will feel disgusted when you look at its mouth, but in fact this thing is a supreme delicacy. It is mainly eaten in Europe. Legend has it that the kings of Europe died from eating this thing, but this is a real upper-class delicacy. Feeling Jiang Hai's confusion, Edward Anderson couldn't help but explain to Jiang Hai. Is this game delicious? Looking at the long eel, Jiang Hai said with some disbelief. What's wrong with this eel? It's really hard for him to imagine that this thing is a supreme delicacy. T. This thing is not only ugly, but it also sucks blood for a living. It looks like a pig intestine with long teeth, which is really scary. When we go back in a while, I will make it for you and you will know. When Edward Anderson heard Jiang Hai's words, he couldn't help but laugh. Jiang Hai also felt that he should try it. He didn't mind eating this kind of thing. At this time, the fish net was loosened, and countless fish fell on the deck. Tommy Charles and the others began to classify the fish. Different fish had different prices, so naturally, the test results were different. Peralton took a knife and began to grab the fish. Like an old fisherman, she first cut open the fish's belly to check if there were parasites inside, then looked at the stomach to see what was inside. Then she took photos of these cut-open fish and sent them to the experts. At the same time, she called people to come over and pick up the fish from Jiang Hai's fishing ground. After everything was done, everyone returned to the manor's dock. After returning to the manor, it was still very early. It was only 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Edward Anderson specially went to Jiang Hai's place to cook the fish first. In fact, it was called an eel, but it was not a fish. Because it was parasitic, it could grow to any size. This time, Jiang Hai harvested a total of 6 eels. The big one was about half a meter long, and the small one was only 20 centimeters long. Edward Anderson's method was very simple. First, he cut off the head, then roasted the big one and stewed the small one. In half an hour, these 2 dishes were ready. Jiang Hai tasted it. The taste of this thing, how should he describe it? He didn't like it very much. He had eaten yellowfin fish before, and he still had them now. This thing tasted similar to yellow trout, but it was more fishy. The meat was also very soft, and there was a unique sweetness of the seafood in Jiang Hai's place. It tasted good, if not for its appearance. While eating these things, the people called by Peralton also arrived. They drove 2 pickup trucks and randomly loaded the fish in the 2 pickup trucks. After that, they left. They would test these fish to see if they were harmful, how much nutrition they had, and whether there were parasites. Then they would set the price. Of course, the output of the fish was also one of the criteria. Now, can you tell me how I made these fish famous? Seeing the fish being taken away, Jiang Hai looked at Peralton and asked with some doubts. He really didn't understand now. Just now he thought about it. Did Peralton mean that he didn't care about Wall Street and forcibly raised the price? But this was impossible. Why would the people buy it? Some people would say that he was happy to sell it this way. One side was willing to hit, and the other side was willing to be hit. In the past, Jiang Hai had read a lot of farming novels in China. The protagonists in those novels all started off by planting radishes, cabbages, and so on. After they were planted, they directly ignored the market price and sold a radish for more than 100 renminbi. Then, people would go crazy and fight for it. At first, it was quite cool, but later, Jiang Hai knew that it was not possible, because this was considered a way to break the law of the market. In China, it was not allowed to sell things at a high price or a low price. This was breaking the balance of the market. It was a malicious competition. Although there was no such thing in the US, a red fish cost $10 per kilogram. How could it be sold for $30 and triple the price? If it was Jiang Hai, he wouldn't buy it. Just good quality is not enough. This is different from beef. Special quality is commercial. The difference is obvious. Jiang Hai's fish is healthier, more delicious, and more nutritious. But in the US, Fish farming is not popular here, so the fish are all wild. The difference between these wild fish and Jianghai's fish is not particularly big. At least, Jianghai didn't feel that the price difference was 3 times. Naturally, no one would buy it. Everything has to be advertised just like your cattle. If we didn't go to the New York Beef Show, we wouldn't have seen it. And your fish is the same. You have to go to the fishing show. Looking at Jianghai, Pralton said to him with a smile. She is quite confident in Jianghai's fish, especially after tasting it personally. From the perspective of a businessman, selling it for 3 times the price may be a loss. Jianghai shouldn't have raised these red fish. He should have raised more valuable fish. If he had raised fish of grouper and above, then now Jianghai's income would be much higher. No matter what it is, branding is very important. If your cow wins the gold medal at the National Beef Cattle Exhibition, then we will have more reasons to raise the price of your beef cattle. It's the same for your fish. If you can win the gold medal at the fish exhibition, plus the original taste of your fish, it won't be too much to sell it for $30 a kilogram. Looking at Jianghai, Pralton said with a serious face, and hearing her words, Jianghai also thought carefully. Fishing show? To be honest, Jianghai understands that if there is a beef show, there must be a fishing show, but he didn't pay attention to these before. The world's largest fishing show, WFE, was established in 1973, but it is only held once every 6 years. You won't be able to catch it this time. The companies that win awards at this exhibition will receive the attention of the world. This is inevitable, but it was just completed last year. This year, there will be no more. In addition, there are 3 major international fishing shows. Looking at Jianghai, Pralton introduced him. The largest one is the International Fishing Exhibition in Huaxia, which is the largest fishing professional trade exhibition in Asia. It is also one of the 3 most influential fishing exhibitions in the world. It is a 5-star exhibition rated by the UA Department of Commerce, but you are a bit far away. The European Seafood Exhibition will be held in Brussels, the capital of Belgium, but I think you may have some understanding of the temperament of Europeans. Many people in Europe still live in the world where they were the world's overlords, so it is estimated that you will only be there for the show. Looking at Jianghai, Pralton also introduced the fishing exhibitions to Jianghai, but unfortunately, there was nothing for Jianghai. Sister, just tell me what I can go. After listening to so much nonsense, Jianghai couldn't stand it, so he said to Pralton. Hearing Jianghai's impatient words, Pralton couldn't help but glare at him. This guy is really troublesome. The last one, that is, the Boston Fishing Show. Looking at Jianghai, Pralton said seriously. Boston Fishing Show? Is it in Boston? Hearing the name of the fishing show, Jianghai asked with some doubts. Of course, it's in Boston. This fishing show was first held in 1981. It's one of the 3 major exhibitions in the world, and it's also the largest exhibition in North America. If your fish takes the lead here, then it's reasonable for us to raise the price, and it's best for you to register another brand or company, so that it's more convenient to promote your fish and your beef. Looking at Jianghai, Pralton said with a serious face, and hearing her words, Jianghai also remembered. Going to the fishing show is inevitable. After all, this fishing show is not far from him, and he is quite confident in his fish. As long as he goes, it should not be a problem for him to get an award. He is still very confident about this. Whether it's because he is from Boston, this is a face given by the host, or the quality of his fish, there will be no problem. But as Pralton said, setting up a company? Jianghai really didn't think about it, because he is very lazy and afraid of trouble. When he thought of all kinds of troubles after setting up a company, Jianghai felt that his head was a little big. Forget it, let's not talk about other things first. When is the fishing show? Shaking his head, Jianghai decided to study this first. It's better to ask about the time first. After the spring, he will have a lot of work here. The Boston Fishing Show should be in the middle of April. After you go to Texas to attend the beef show, you can come back just in time to attend the fishing show. After thinking about it, Pralton was not too sure. Although sometimes she would go to see if there was anything good that could be introduced to Sam's Club, these things were basically reminded by her assistant. She really can't remember the time. Jiang Hai can also understand this. Time slowly passed while the two were discussing. In the blink of an eye, it was evening. Chia, Qijie, Azalina, Daliana, and Marian also came back. When they saw Prawalton and Cheryl Lee in the villa, they were stunned because they really didn't know that they would come. Really? You didn't tell me that there were guests at home. I'll prepare dinner. The first to react was Chia. She smiled and said to Jiang Hai, then she was going to the kitchen to prepare dinner, but Prawalton also stood up at this time. Oh, we are all sisters. You don't have to be so polite. Cheryl, let's go help. The moment Prawalton finished speaking, the atmosphere in the villa was not very good, and it was instantly silent. Chapter 677. Oh hee, no need will do it. You've driven here for a whole day, you should take a rest first. Glancing at Prawalton, the somewhat bewildered Cheryl, and Jiang Hai, Qijie said with a serious face. Well, we'll do it. Hearing her elder sister's words, Chia, who had already walked to the door, couldn't help but smile and said. Then she walked into the kitchen and got busy. However, Prawalton and Cheryl didn't stay idle after exchanging glances with each other. Instead, they went to clean up the bowls and chopsticks. Jiang Hai stood in the middle of the room. He felt that the atmosphere between the four people was undergoing a subtle change. It seemed that this change wasn't a good feeling. The hostility between the four people seemed to be somewhat vivid. In fact, for Prawalton, the initial relationship between her and Jiang Hai was actually just a misunderstanding. In her heart, Jiang Hai was more of a business partner. Otherwise, she wouldn't have thought of Jiang Hai when something happened to her. However, since Jiang Hai stood up for her at the Walmart Group's banquet, Prawalton's thoughts about Jiang Hai had also quietly changed. It was true that she liked women, but she was sure that Jiang Hai had unknowingly entered her heart. Now, she could also say that she liked Jiang Hai. Originally, she didn't care who Jiang Hai found because she didn't care at all. But now that she cared, she would pay attention to Jiang Hai. She didn't care about Cheryl and the others. After all, they were people she once loved. Living with the people she loved and letting the people she loved love each other was something she could accept. But she had to consider other people. After all, her point of view was no longer the same as Jiang Hai's. Jiang Hai, what's going on? After walking to Jiang Hai's side, Daliana whispered to Jiang Hai. She was indeed a bit confused. How would I know? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai didn't know what to say and muttered in a low voice. It's all your fault. Aren't you going to settle it? At this moment, Marian also sat over and said to Jiang Hai with a smile. What does a little brat know? Go play somewhere else. Looking at the twins, Jiang Hai threw a disdainful glance at them before shifting his gaze to the kitchen. Hopefully, there won't be any commotion tonight. Probably, TSK, how are we small? All you do is look at those big breasts of the Great Moon Empire. Why don't you pay attention to our development? Humph, I'm not going to talk to you anymore, you idiot Jiang Hai. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Daliana patted Jiang Hai's shoulder, then stood up and went to help with Marian. But at this time, Jiang Hai's attention wasn't on them. He was still paying attention to the four guys. Fortunately, nothing happened during dinner, although the atmosphere was a bit awkward. After dinner, everyone packed up their things together. Then, Chia and Qijie took the initiative to arrange 2 rooms for Prawalton and Cheryl Lee. But they asked to stay in the same room. Chia and Qijie didn't care about it. After the arrangement, Qijie went directly to Jiang Hai's room. This was also a declaration of sovereignty. At least, she had to rely on Prawalton and Cheryl Lee. Her relationship with Jiang Hai might be closer. In this regard, Jiang Hai had no other way except for a little headache. He was really weak in dealing with relationships. After returning to the room, he naturally stayed with Qijie. They took a shower first, then did some exercise and took another shower. When the two hugged each other and were ready to sleep, it was already 11 o'clock in the evening. Isn't this Prawalton a lesbian? Did you take her down? Curling up in Jiang Hai's arms like a kitten, Qijie looked at Jiang Hai and said with a look of contempt. Jiang Hai was really not picky. As long as he saw something good, he would eat it. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai didn't know how to respond. Could it be that his charm couldn't be stopped? Don't joke around, ugh, hee hee, these are all accidents. But after the accident, there will be some trouble. But between her and me, it is estimated that we will never be together. After all, the forces she represents are not the same as mine. I don't want to be annexed by the Walton family. But she told me something today that is worth considering. Looking at Qi Jie in front of him, Jiang Hai wisely chose to change the topic. What did she say? Hearing Jiang Hai say that Pra Walton's proposal was worth considering, Qi Jie couldn't help but raise her eyebrows and ask him. She was really afraid that Pra Walton would make some excessive demands. She asked me to set up a company or brand for this Soaring Dragon Manor, and then participate in various exhibitions. After making a name for myself, maybe I will earn more. The price of fish this year is not very good. Hearing Qi Jie's words, Jiang Hai thought for a moment and said to her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Jie's first thought was to oppose. After all, this was Pra Walton's proposal. As a love rival, it was inevitable for her to oppose all her proposals, but she was a highly intelligent person after all. Thinking about it, she also understood that Pra Walton did this to make more money, and Jiang Hai can also make more money. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but hesitate, although she knew that Jiang Hai didn't care much about money. But it was really not good to not earn money. And most importantly, Qi Jie always hoped that Jiang Hai could do something serious. Instead of staying at home all day, doing some improper things with Aphrodite and other little sluts. A man should still prioritize his career, so now when she heard Jiang Hai's words, Qi Jie really didn't know what to say. I don't know much about these things. If you want to ask, you can ask my sister. In the end, she decided not to express her opinion. If it was some medical things, then she would naturally not decline, but now it was business things, she really didn't understand much. Asking Qi Li might be a good choice. After hearing her words, Jiang Hai thought for a moment, he really didn't understand. So he picked up the phone and dialed Qi Li's number. Although it was dark in the United States now, it was noon on the other side of the ocean. Qi Li had just finished dealing with a matter. At this time, she was sitting in front of the coffee table in her office, drinking the tea that Jiang Hai brought back for the new year while looking at the foggy sky of the capital. But the weather was not good. Qi Li's mood was still quite good. First, because the cheese company had officially stepped on the right track, and her revenge had been taken last year. Second, because the relationship between Jiang Hai and her was indeed developing in a good direction. In the case of a good relationship, the business was also quite good. No wonder Qi Li's mood was very good. In the past few days, her mood had been very good. Occasionally, at night, she would think of Jiang Hai and feel a little lonely. I really wish I could just quit my job and stay by his side every day. She stretched and picked up her phone. She didn't know when, but the screen of her phone had changed to a photo of Jiang Hai. However, the image of Jiang Hai in the photo was not very good. At this time, he was squatting in the snow, holding a sweet potato in his hand and eating it. Coupled with the outdoor clothes he was wearing, he did look a little tattered. Who would have thought that such a guy was worth tens of billions of yuan? This photo was taken during the New Year this year. Once, Jiang Hai was waiting for her downstairs. Maybe he was a little hungry, so he bought a roasted sweet potato and ate it there. When her car drove to the opposite side, she happened to see this scene, so she took a photo and used it as a meme. Looking at the photo of Jiang Hai pouting and frowning while eating the sweet potato, it could be said that he was not handsome at all. If it was anyone else, it would be an absolutely ugly photo, but in Qi Li's eyes, he was so cute, so handsome, so free and easy, and not pretentious at all. She had to admit that the phrase, "beauty is in the eye of the beholder," was really true. Her fingertips gently stroked Jiang Hai's photo, and Qi Li looked at him so infatuatedly. But at this moment, suddenly, a phone call came in. When she saw that the screen was black, Qi Li frowned subconsciously. She wanted to see who dared to disturb her time looking at Jiang Hai. But when she found out that the number was Jiang Hai's, she couldn't help but smile. "Hello, Jiang Hai." She immediately picked up the phone, and Qi Li's happy voice also passed into Jiang Hai's ears from the other side of the phone. "Hello, Qi Li, what are you doing now? Are you busy? Have you had lunch?" Listening to Qi Li's sweet voice, Jiang Hai couldn't help but ask her. It could be heard that since Qi Li and Jiang Hai had a substantial relationship, the relationship between the two had indeed improved by leaps and bounds. Hearing this, Qi Jie, who was in Jiang Hai's arms, couldn't help but feel a little jealous. She turned her body and grabbed Jiang Hai's vital part with her hands. Feeling Qi Jie's movements, Jiang Hai couldn't help but pinch her upper body. Feeling Jiang Hai's movements, Qi Jie couldn't help but soften a lot, but her hands were still moving. She looked at Jiang Hai coquettishly. She was telling Jiang Hai that she was jealous. Fortunately, the company is fully on track now, and I don't have to work overtime anymore. Hee hee, as for lunch, of course, I ate it. Humans are made of iron, and rice is made of steel, right? Right now, I'm sitting in the office drinking coffee. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li also spoke to Jiang Hai like a machine gun. Obviously, the two of them didn't feel uncomfortable talking about this kind of conversation. Well, I'll be fine after lunch. By the way, I have something to ask you. Listening to Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai also smiled, and then told her about the things he said to Proalton. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li fell into contemplation. When Qi Li was contemplating, Jiang Hai didn't urge her, but quietly waited for her to reply. As for Qi Jie, at this time, she touched some of Jiang Hai's indescribable places and found that she was already a little moved, so she quietly sneaked into Jiang Hai's bed, opened her small mouth, and put some indescribable things into her mouth. Feeling her movements, Jiang Hai's body couldn't help but stiffen, but he couldn't do anything else. He had to admit that while he was on the phone with his nominal wife, his lower body was enjoying the movements of his sister-in-law. This made Jiang Hai feel a little stimulated, but he didn't know what to do. Perhaps because she felt Jiang Hai's discomfort, this encouraged Qi Jie to be arrogant. Well, I thought about it. Proalton's proposal is actually quite good. The seafood and beef in your manor, if they are really sold at the normal market price, they are really not worth much. If you can really package them and brand them, the effect may be better. At this time, Qi Li didn't know Jiang Hai's situation at this time, so after thinking about it, she still said to Jiang Hai, "Hissa? Oh, I see, but how do I set up this thing?" Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai also reacted, so he asked her. In this regard, Qi Li really knew much more than Jiang Hai. In fact, it's very easy to set up a company, but you have to think about where to set it up, what are the benefits of setting it up in the United States, what are the benefits of setting it up in China, and what are the benefits of setting it up in China. It also needs some procedures and so on. It's quite troublesome. Hearing Jiang Hai ask her, Qi Li's heart couldn't help but move. In fact, it was indeed more troublesome to set up a company, but it also depended on the person. Who was Jiang Hai? A person with assets of billions of dollars and tens of billions of yuan. As long as he took out a few $100 million, it would be an extremely popular investment in any peaceful country in the world. It could be said that as long as he wanted, he could set up a company. But Qi Li was thinking about another problem. Anyway, Jiang Hai didn't know much about this. If he wanted to set up a company, then she was the only person to help. If he decided to set it up in China, then he would come back, so she could meet him. If he set up a company in the United States, then she could also help him, and they could still meet. Thinking of this, Qi Li couldn't help but praise herself in her heart. She had to admit that sometimes these little tricks were very useful. Oh, if that's the case, then I'll think about it, but I feel that my chances of setting up a company in the United States are higher. After listening to Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai thought about it. Now that his foundation was in the United States, it was indeed not easy for him to go back to China to set up a company. And okay, if you want to set it up, I'll help you take a look. By the way, Jiang Hai, I miss you. Chapter 678. I miss you too. Well, I won't delay your work any further. Tomorrow, I'll go to Moses Adams and settle the company's matters. He knows more about this than I do. If there's a need, I'll give you a call. Well, that's all for now. Listening to Qi Li's voice on the phone, Jiang Hai didn't know what to say now. He could only say a simple sentence and then quickly made a decision. After exchanging a few words with Qi Li, Jiang Hai hung up the phone directly. At the moment when he hung up the phone, he couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. But with this sigh of relief, his waist couldn't help but loosen, and then Chi-Jie's body stiffened. After about a minute or so, Chi-Jie raised her head again. After glancing at Jiang Hai, she made a swallowing motion, then lowered her body again. After cleaning up, she went to the bathroom, brushed her teeth again, and returned to bed. Jiang Hai, I miss you. Nestled in Jiang Hai's arms, Chi-Jie couldn't help but imitate Chi Li's voice on the phone just now and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but slap her butt. This girl is too bad. TSK, you bad guy. Tell me, between me and my sister, who do you like more? Looking at Jiang Hai, Chi-Jie raised her head and asked with a proud face. I'm not telling you. Sleep. Glancing at her, Jiang Hai hugged her sideways and closed his eyes. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't answer her question directly, Chi-Jie couldn't help but secretly snort at Jiang Hai, but then she laughed again. In fact, sometimes, it was better for her that Jiang Hai didn't make a choice, because if Jiang Hai really made a choice, it would be hard to say. Nestled in Jiang Hai's arms, Chi-Jie had a good sleep. When she woke up the next morning, Jiang Hai was still sleeping. After washing up, she quietly left Jiang Hai's room. At this time, she didn't change into formal clothes because there were 2 guests in the villa. Instead, she seemed to be wearing more red fruits, as if to prove that something had happened between her and Jiang Hai last night. She only wore a tulle nightdress, and the 3 indescribable places were clearly visible. When she came downstairs, she happened to see that Walton and the others had already woken up. At this time, the 2 were in front of the warehouse. After seeing her, they walked into the warehouse. Looking at the seafood and beef that Jiang Hai raised there, the 2 heard footsteps and turned to look at the person who came. When they found that it was Chi-Jie, they turned their heads back and continued to look at the ingredients in front of them. To be honest, I really envy you. Not only can you stay by Jiang Hai's side. Looking at the beef in front of her, Walton couldn't help but say with some emotion. Hearing her words, Chi-Jie couldn't help but lean against the door of the warehouse and look at her like this. What's there to envy? If I remember correctly, Jiang Hai's family is far less rich than you and your family. When it comes to enjoying life, you are much better than Jiang Hai. Hearing Walton's words, Chi-Jie said slowly. Life is not only determined by money. Here, you can enjoy a lot of things that are difficult for me to enjoy. For example, the beef here, the seafood here. If I want to eat it, if it is not deducted from the company, I have to come here privately to get it. But if you want to eat it, you can eat it at any time. Another example is the pressure of life. I need to manage a big company and am busy every day, but you just need to quietly stay at home. Finally, there is Jiang Hai's body. If I want to do something with him, I have to look at your face and choose the time. But you don't need to, right? Anyone who has felt Jiang Hai's body knows that that feeling is addictive. Looking at Chi-Jie in front of her, Walton said softly. After all, Walton received a different education, so she can say such words without changing her expression. But Chi-Jie's face suddenly turned red, and her eyes were dodging, but she knew that this was not the time to avoid the question. If you want, you can also live in this villa. I believe that with Jiang Hai's relationship with you, he will not stop you from living here. Looking at Walton in front of her, Chi-Jie said with a serious face. But this is impossible. You are a very smart girl, so you can see that Jiang Hai and I can't be together. Shaking her head, Walton glanced at Chi-Jie. This little girl is really smart. This move of retreating in order to advance is really good. In that case, you can only be envious. Shrugging, Chi-Jie said with a smile. Then, without giving Walton a chance to fight back, she turned and left the door of the warehouse. Looking at her back, Walton's eyes narrowed. This girl is really interesting. But in the blink of an eye, she took her gaze back. Although she wanted to tease her, even if it was for Jiang Hai's sake, she would definitely not do so, so she just shrugged and took her gaze back. After a while, Jiang Hai got up with a yawn. After everyone had an awkward breakfast together, Jiang Hai called Moses Adams to determine if he was in Boston. At this time, Moses Adams was really not in Boston. He was attending a legal conference in New York, but he should be back at the company before 11 o'clock. Jiang Hai drove his Tesla Roadster to Boston. He hadn't tried the autopilot or the summoning function yet. Since he bought it, he only drove it to Winthrop once, which shocked Mayor Wallace. This time, he was prepared to go a long way. After confirming that the battery was sufficient, Jiang Hai drove the car on the road. The autopilot function is indeed very good. It allows Jiang Hai to drive the car on its own on the highway. He began to use his mobile phone to look up information. He looked up information about the Texas All-American Beef Cattle Competition and the Boston Fisheries Exhibition. This was the most important thing for him to do, so he must take it seriously. Now, Jiang Hai's beef could be said to have a certain degree of popularity in the northeast corner of the United States, but in the country, even Sam's Club had sold Jiang Hai's beef like crazy. But in fact, everyone didn't know that this beef was produced by Jiang Hai. But if the Texas American Beef Competition was like the one in New York, Jiang Hai's beef would crush everything, then his reputation would really spread throughout the United States, and even Europe and China. If he had done this last year, it might have caused some unnecessary trouble because there were more people watching him. But this time, it was different. After Jiang Hai had a certain amount of chips, he was no longer a softie, but a hedgehog. If you want to catch him, then you have to be prepared to get your hands pierced. He is not an easy target to make a move on. While thinking about these two competitions, Jiang Hai went to Boston Moses Adams Lawyer Building. But when he arrived, he was stunned for a moment. Jiang Hai had been to Moses Adams Lawyer Building before. This was an office building near the city center of Boston with a total of 27 floors. Just like in China, the boss here rented each floor to a different company. The original Moses Adams had some reputation in Boston, but his reputation was not very prominent. He only rented about 1/3 of the 15th floor and set up his own law firm. This was also because of Jiang Hai's help. Jiang Hai remembered that when his law firm opened, Jiang Hai came. At that time, in addition to his law firm, there were 4 companies on the 15th floor: a real estate management company, a trading company, a construction company, and an advertising company. But in just a few months, almost a year, not only did he occupy the 15th floor, but he also occupied the 16th floor. Yes, standing in this office building, Jiang Hai looked at the nameplate. The 15th and 16th floors were Adams' law firm. He is really awesome. Whispering in a low voice, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh at himself. It seems that Moses Adams is also slowly getting better. Of course, he knows that Moses Adams is where he is today, and it is inseparable from him. Let's go, don't lament here. Shaking his head, Jiang Hai threw the thought that he was indeed a salted fish in the back of his mind and then walked into the elevator. The elevator stopped on the 15th floor. As soon as Jiang Hai walked out of the elevator door, he saw the front desk of Adams' law firm. At this time, a young man in a suit, tie, and gold-rimmed glasses was signing for something at this time. The girls at the front desk were like love-struck fools at this time, looking at the man in front of them, fantasizing about what happened with this man. Of course, Jiang Hai didn't know what happened. In fact, this guest was also full of malice. Jiang Hai didn't know him, but this didn't stop him. In Jiang Hai's view, a guy who dressed like this and exuded an arrogant aura was destined to not be a good person, so he directly jumped over him and looked at the front desk inside. "Hello, sir, how can I help you?" Seeing Jiang Hai's head suddenly popping out from the side, the front desk here was stunned for a moment, but her good manners still made her instantly show 8 teeth and said to Jiang Hai with a smile. And the man with glasses here, after hearing the words of the front desk, couldn't help but look back and saw Jiang Hai at a glance. He couldn't help but have some doubts. He glanced at Jiang Hai, but he didn't know who Jiang Hai was, so he didn't speak. "Oh, I'm here to look for..." Seeing this scene without drama, Jiang Hai despised the man with glasses in his heart. At this time, shouldn't he be very pretentious and say, "Kid, don't you know first come, first served?" Or, "Don't you see me here? Get out." Or something like that. He didn't say it. Jiang Hai couldn't slap his face according to the routine. He hated the feeling of not being in control the most, but fortunately, Jiang Hai was not a face-slapping maniac, so he adjusted his mood and explained his purpose to the front desk. "Why are you here?" But at this moment, a voice interrupted Jiang Hai, who wanted to explain his purpose of coming. Then everyone looked at the source of the voice. Jiang Hai found a tall woman with a somewhat cold face. At this time, she was wearing a white office lady suit and appeared in front of Jiang Hai. When she saw Jiang Hai, she frowned. She didn't understand. Miss Dale. As soon as they saw this woman, the 5 front desk here stood up at the same time, bowed respectfully to this woman, and then said to her with some fear, "Cough, I said I came to see you. Do you believe me?" Jiang Hai looked at this woman and couldn't help but smile. Yes, this woman was none other than Penelope Dale, the daughter of the second in command of the cowboy in Jiang Hai's manor, Burke Dale. Jiang Hai had met her many times and even had the opportunity to be alone with her, but the relationship between the two didn't seem to be very good. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Penelope's frown deepened, and the man with glasses next to Jiang Hai couldn't help but raise his head. "Please don't joke, Mr. Jiang." Penelope heard what Jiang Hai said and couldn't help but say with some depression. In fact, Jiang Hai was not only her boss's boss, but she was also her father's boss. The relationship between the two was indeed a bit. "Penelope, do you need my help?" Seeing Penelope clearly rejected Jiang Hai's words, coupled with her frown, the man with glasses couldn't help but move to her side with an obscene smile. Some young and ignorant people also called this the smile of a warm man. He said to Penelope, but Penelope just looked back at him calmly. "No need. Also, please call me Miss Dale." "Thank you." Looking at the man beside her, Penelope calmly refused him. Hearing Penelope's words, the man with glasses also shrugged. Obviously, he was used to her attitude. "Mr. Jiang Hai, you haven't explained your intention yet." "Forget it, it doesn't matter. Come with me to the office." Then Penelope couldn't help but turn her head and look at Jiang Hai. But halfway through, she gave up. She knew that Jiang Hai definitely wouldn't say anything good. Anyway, she was really familiar with Jiang Hai. She wasn't afraid that he would have any bad intentions, and she knew that he wouldn't make a move. She was still very clear about what kind of person Jiang Hai was. He had evil intentions but no guts, but he liked to joke, so she led Jiang Hai into her office. When Jiang Hai walked into her office, Jiang Hai seemed to hear many men's broken hearts and glasses. Chapter 679. Who is that guy? He can actually enter Miss Penelope's office. I really envy him. He can actually take the initiative to enter Miss Penelope's office. He is so happy. That guy can't be Miss Penelope's boyfriend, right? It looks like they have known each other for a long time. Oh my God, look at that guy. How could Miss Penelope fall in love with him? Don't talk nonsense or I will break up with you. Miss Penelope is my goddess. Yes, don't talk nonsense. Even if they have a relationship, it must be that he has something on Miss Penelope. It must be like this. It seems that you, the ice goddess, are still very popular here. Putting down the curtains on the window, Jiang Hai looked at the people outside who were about to riot and couldn't help but smile and talk to Penelope. Especially the man with glasses just now, who had been standing there and staring at the office here. Jiang Hai saw clearly that his fists had been clenched, but he didn't dare to come in. He didn't know if he was afraid of Penelope or afraid of himself. After listening to Jiang Hai's remarks, Penelope just glanced at him and sat at her desk. At this time, Jiang Hai also came over and glanced at the name tag on the desk. Lawyer, Ms. Penelope Daller. Oh, don't tell me you are a lawyer. You can already take on cases by yourself? Looking at Penelope, Jiang Hai said with some surprise. This is all thanks to you. After going to Huaxia with you, because I had some exchanges with the people in Huaxia, after coming back, Mr. Adams asked me to take charge of the case about Huaxia. The original internship period has passed, so I directly became a full-time employee. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Penelope said to Jiang Hai without raising her head. For her, she really had to thank Jiang Hai for this matter. This is also the result of your hard work. Sitting opposite Penelope, Jiang Hai no longer had the intention to tease her when they were alone. In fact, in Jiang Hai's view, he and Burke Dollar should be of the same generation. After all, he was Burke Dollar's boss. He didn't care if Edward Anderson called him uncle. They were of the same generation, so Penelope should be his niece. Therefore, it was fine to joke around sometimes. Of course, they couldn't do it in public, but they still had to be serious in private. "Are you here to look for Mr. Adams? He should be back before 11. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Penelope nodded gratefully, but her eyes were still cold and she was talking about serious matters. "Well, this time I want to turn my manor into a company or brand. Then I'll go to Texas to participate in the beef show, and then come back to Boston to participate in the fishing show. Without a company's name, this product won't be so easy to sell." Hearing Penelope's words, Jiang Hai also answered seriously. He did come here for this, so there was no need to lie. "Well, if you sell your beef and seafood according to the market price, it will be a loss." Although she didn't get along well with Jiang Hai, she had always been a very upright person. Not to mention that she had no enmity with Jiang Hai, only gratitude. Even if there was enmity between them, she wouldn't lie through her teeth. She had eaten Jiang Hai's beef and seafood, which could be said to be the best of their kind. If they sold it according to the market price, it would be a huge loss. The beef was still okay because the price was there. But seafood was different. Any fish had the taste of bluefin tuna back, but it only sold for a few dollars. It was too much of a scam. So I came to ask Moses Adams. He is an expert in this area. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled and said to her. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Penelope naturally didn't doubt it, so she quieted down and continued to look at the file in front of her. Looking at Penelope's appearance, Jiang Hai smiled and shook his head. This girl is really special. But she is not Jiang Hai's type. He still prefers to take the initiative. After all, he is not a good person to take the initiative. He is basically being counteracted. He can't control a girl who is too passive. So he sat on the sofa and picked up his mobile phone to play. After playing the game for a while, Moses Adams also came back. When he came back, Jiang Hai had been in Penelope's room for almost an hour, but the people outside were anxious. But Penelope had already said that no one could enter her office casually. Even if it was an urgent matter, it had to be called by phone. In fact, Jiang Hai didn't know that Penelope was obsessed with cleanliness. She couldn't tolerate the smell of others in her private space. Jiang Hai might be an exception. Now that Moses Adams was back, the men outside naturally seemed to have found their backbone. They immediately exaggerated with him, hoping that Moses Adams could uphold justice for them and kick Jiang Hai out. Sure enough, when he heard the person at the front desk say that Penelope called the person Mr. Jiang Hai, Moses Adams suddenly became anxious. He walked quickly to Penelope Daller's door, and then knocked on the door in front of everyone. This made the people outside very anxious. What a joke! Shouldn't he kick the door open directly at this time? Why is he knocking on the door now? These men had now begun to imagine in their minds, originally, in this 1 hour, Jiang Hai and Penelope must have had some intimate relationship. The plot should be that Jiang Hai had caught her weakness, something that could make her unable to inherit her beloved job as a lawyer. Using this weakness, he took advantage of her weakness, and at the same time, asked her for money. If it was an acquaintance, Penelope's coldness just now would not be possible. Penelope's expression clearly showed that she was not willing to see him, but she was afraid of him and had to compromise. In the eyes of these people who suffered losses, got angry, drank some water, and became dirty, the plot of Jiang Hai and Penelope should be like this. At this time, in this hour, Jiang Hai should be in the room, taking advantage of Penelope. It was not easy for their backbone, Moses Adams, to come over, but he still knocked on the door. Was he reminding the two people in the room to get dressed? Who is it? Hearing the knock on the door, Penelope, who had been reading the file, couldn't help but look up and ask. Obviously, she didn't know the story outside. This kind of story generally happened in Japan. This kind of plot also had an English name called NTR. In layman's terms, it was Tauren. Penelope didn't know that she had been fantasized as a female character in NTR. If she knew, she would probably bite the person outside to death. "It's me, is Mr. Jiang Hai here?" Hearing Penelope's words, this country's Moses Adams immediately responded in a low voice. "Oh, I'm here." But just as his voice fell, Jiang Hai, who happened to be sitting on the other side of the door, opened the door. "Mr. Jiang Hai, I'm really sorry to have kept you waiting for so long." As soon as he saw Jiang Hai, Moses Adams's lackey mode went online in an instant. He held Jiang Hai's hand and almost rushed to kiss it. It was quite lively. "It's okay, anyway, I'm just staying at home. Your business is urgent, so it's more important." Jiang Hai was also a very easygoing person, so he didn't care about this. He waved his hand and said to him, "I say, can you two go to the living room?" But at this moment, Penelope, who was sitting there, suddenly couldn't help but ask, "Oh yes, I forgot. Mr. Jiang, let's go to the living room. The front desk will send 2 cups of green tea." As soon as he heard Penelope's words, Moses Adams immediately patted his head and said, then shouted to the front desk. After that, the two of them left Penelope's room. After the two of them left, Penelope also walked out of the room. Looking at the goddess's normal expression and unchanged attire, the men outside couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Could it be that nothing happened just now? Penelope was too lazy to care about what these people were thinking. Instead, she closed her door and walked into the office. Then she took out her wet wipes and wanted to wipe the sofa where Jiang Hai sat, but she froze for a moment. Then she put away the wet wipes again, walked back to her desk, and continued to read the files. Because she found that the place where Jiang Hai sat was not dirty. This was the first time she felt this way. At this time, Jiang Hai and Moses Adams also walked into the living room, and Jiang Hai also explained his intentions. "Boss, you are finally going to set up a company. You have to know that this is what I am best at." Hearing that Jiang Hai was finally going to set up a company, Moses Adams was quite excited. He slammed the table and then said excitedly, "After we set up the company, we can make your brand's name known. With the guarantee of Walmart, we can be listed on Nasdaq and start to sell shares. Your property will go from a few billion to tens of billions. At that time, I will be the youngest billionaire. The sky is your limit. Give me 3 years, and I will operate your brand into the world's largest top food brand." Looking at Jiang Hai, it was obvious that Moses Adams was a little too excited, and his words were a little off topic. Moses, maybe you are mistaken about one thing. I am not going to be listed or anything. I am just going to set up a company and a brand to make my soaring dragon manners name known. Moreover, I don't need others to invest in me. My company naturally needs to be 100% controlled by me." Looking at Moses Adams in front of him, Jiang Hai thought for a moment and interrupted him. Was he thinking too much? Just setting up a company and a brand? Hearing Jiang Hai say this, Moses Adams also woke up from his dream and then smiled a little. It seemed that Jiang Hai still had no intention of influencing the world. Just setting up a company and a brand. Yes, Jiang Hai really had no ambition. Influencing the world? Forget it, it is more important to have a good sleep. This is easy. I can help you with the company. The same goes for the brand. Just apply for a trademark registration. But boss, I am a lawyer. I can be your company's legal counsel, but I can't manage the company for you. You need to find a professional manager. Understanding Jiang Hai's meaning, Moses Adams also officially entered the role of a lawyer and said to Jiang Hai, "Well, I will study this myself. How much does the company's registration fund need?" Nodding, Jiang Hai was very clear that Moses Adams was very busy. He really did not have the time and mood to manage his own company, and Jiang Hai was not going to let him manage it. Speaking of which, this company naturally had to be handed over to someone he trusted, but among the people he trusted, there was no one with business talent. Except for Qi Li, there seemed to be no one. The rest of Qi Jia only knew medicine, Chia only knew how to cook, Feng Yunshan only knew how to mess things up, Ai Xiaoxi did not even step into society, Azalina only knew how to kill, and Aphrodite and the others had no skills except in bed. Selena Gomez was an artist, and Pralton was also in charge of Sam's Club. So after thinking about it, among the women around him, it seemed that only Qi Li had this talent. Then, after settling things here first, he would go to Qi Li. "This doesn't matter. Your company is nothing more than to promote your brand. You have long-term partners, so you don't need to find other channels and get benefits. So, hundreds of thousands can operate normally. Of course, if you have more money, you can do it faster. I just heard that you want to do it before the National Beef Show next month, so I recommend that your registration fund is 3 million. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams said seriously. Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai did not say anything and directly transferred 3 million to his card. Faced with Jiang Hai's trust, Moses Adams also did business according to the rules and specially signed an entrustment agreement. Otherwise, he would not have taken Jiang Hai's $3 million. After signing with Moses Adams, Jiang Hai also took the agreement and prepared to leave. Moses Adams went directly to the Public Business Bureau in Boston to handle the affairs of Jiang Hai's company. As for Jiang Hai, under the hostile gazes of the men, he left the office and went downstairs to his car. He picked up his phone and hesitated for a moment. He decided to go home and talk to Qi Jie before calling Qi Li. If he called directly, it would be troublesome if Qi Li came over and saw Qi Jie and Qi Ye. After all, in Qi Li's world, these two sisters were still in Miami. Chapter 680. The time was 8:30 in the morning, in a coffee shop outside Feng Yunshan's company. At this time, 3 people are sitting opposite each other, and these 3 people are all related to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai's wife and name, Qi Li. Jiang Hai's first lover, his junior high school classmate Feng Yunshan. Jiang Hai's second lover, Ai Xiaoxi. It's really awkward for these 3 people to sit together. Although they are already very familiar with each other, their relationship is very subtle. Why are you looking for us? Finally, Ai Xiaoxi couldn't hold back. She put down the spoon that stirred the coffee cup in front of her and looked up at Qi Li. Hearing her words, Qi Li and Feng Yunshan also put down the things in their hands. It seems that the topic is finally about to start. Jiang Hai called me. I'm going to Winthrop tomorrow. When Jiang Hai confirmed the company's registration, it was almost 12 o'clock. It's noon in the United States, but it's midnight in China. At that time, he also sent a message to Qi Li, but Qi Li saw it this morning. After seeing it, she had already decided to go to Winthrop, but not today, because she has to arrange the company's affairs today. She booked a ticket for tomorrow, but before going, it doesn't prevent her from meeting Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshan first. Jiang Hai asked you to go? Hearing what she said, Feng Yunshan asked with some doubts. She didn't understand why Jiang Hai asked Qi Li to go. Hearing what she said, Qi Li also nodded proudly. Then why did you ask us to come here this time? To warn us, or do you have something to say? Looking at Qi Li's appearance, Ai Xiaoxi, whose mentality has changed a lot, couldn't help but frown and ask Qi Li, why did she look for me? I asked you to come here because I want you to go with me. Staring at the 2 women in front of her, Qi Li directly expressed her intention. But you should know that we don't seem to have a very harmonious relationship. Hearing Qi Li's words, Feng Yunshan asked with some worry. It could be said that there was a clear hatred between them and Qi Li, but now Qi Li actually wanted to bring them to see Jiang Hai. Why was this? This made them a little confused. Could it be that he wanted to call them over to watch them show off their affection? But thinking about it, Jiang Hai couldn't possibly be like this. He really couldn't understand what Lu Li meant. Just answer me. Are you going or not? Looking at the 2 puzzled women in front of her, Qi Li gently brushed her hair behind her ear and said with a smile. She naturally had her own reasons for wanting to go. As for Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi, she really didn't care about them. Hearing Qi Li's words, Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi looked at each other. Both of them were hesitant. You really decided to let Qi Li come over? At this moment, sitting on the bed in Jiang Hai's room, Qi Jie glanced at Qi Ye, who was sitting beside her, and Jiang Hai, who was sitting opposite her. Hearing their words, Jiang Hai also touched his nose slightly awkwardly. Sister, big sister is indeed the person who is most familiar with business operations. Jiang Hai. It's right for brother-in-law to call her over. Gently poking Qi Jie, Qi Ye said to her with a smile, but her calling him brother-in-law gave Jiang Hai goosebumps all over his body. "Ai, it's really… Ugh, it's a blessing for me to meet your sister," he said awkwardly, but when he saw Chi Jie and Chi Ya's gaze, he changed his words halfway and shook his head helplessly. He had met the wrong person. "It's good that you know. And the office is a big deal, just call her over." Rolling her eyes at Jiang Hai, he changed his mind quickly. Chi Jie muttered softly with her chin in her hand. Although she also knew that it was difficult for her to stay with Qi Li by Jiang Hai's side. "Then are you going to tell Qi Li the truth about our relationship?" Looking at Chi Jie and Chi Ya, Jiang Hai thought for a while and said to them, "Tell the truth? No, I'm not going to do that." She shook her head. The relationship between Chi Jie and Qi Li was not particularly good. If this layer of relationship was added, then it would be even more confusing. "Then are you leaving?" Listening to Chi Jie's words, Jiang Hai was confused, and then asked with some confusion. He did not mean to drive away other women because of his woman. In Jiang Hai's heart, although he did not treat everyone equally, he would definitely not do such a thing. However, in Jiang Hai's view, this was really troublesome. "I'm not leaving, I'm going back to Miami temporarily. Since I've decided to stay here for a long time, I'm going back to sell my research institute. The things inside also need to be cleaned up." Chi Jie glanced at Jiang Hai and said very indifferently. But Jiang Hai could hear the disappointment and reluctance in her words. After all, they had been together for a long time, and she had also lived here for a long time. "We can't always be like this. Otherwise, let's just tell the truth." Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai bit his lip. He hated people like this very much. Instead of this, it was better to be direct. So he thought for a while and said to Chi Jie and Chi Ya, "The three sisters, so be it." Anyway, things had already happened. What else could Jiang Hai say? It was impossible for him to deny anything. "Let's talk about it later. At least before Qi Li is ready to live here, we are still your sisters-in-law." "Okay, you can make an appointment with Qi Li. We will leave tomorrow." Looking at Jiang Hai's decision in front of her, Chi Jie also smiled. In fact, she wanted Jiang Hai's answer more. Now that Jiang Hai had said the answer, there was no need for her to say more. Jiang Hai was mentally prepared, but she wasn't ready yet. She needed to think about it carefully. "Tonight, you have to feed me until I'm full." Thinking of this, Chi Jie stood up and took the initiative to sit on Jiang Hai's lap. She said to Jiang Hai with a confused look. At the same time, she gave Chia a look, telling her to leave and close the door. However, Chia did close the door, but she did not leave. Instead, she turned back. I also want to live here." Looking at Jiang Hai and Chi Jie, Chia whispered. After hearing this, Chi Jie could not help but feel her heart skip a beat. Then she slapped Jiang Hai's chest. She was wondering why Xiaoya and Jiang Hai had been acting strangely recently. It turned out that something had happened to them. "You bastard, we three sisters. Are you not going to let any of us go?" Chi Jie said angrily as she glared at Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled awkwardly and did not talk back. Instead, he directly hugged Chi Jie in front of him and kissed her affectionately. As Chi Jie's gaze drifted away, Chi Ya also walked over. After taking off her coat, she hugged Jiang Hai from behind and gently bit his ear. Recently, she had been holding it in for a long time. Jiang Hai had been very busy. It was a silent night. In fact, there was no way to talk about it. If they wrote about what they said, the book would be banned. When Jiang Hai woke up the next morning, Chi Jie and Chi Ya had already left. The one who sent them off was Azalina. In fact, Jiang Hai had already woken up very early, but he did not choose to come downstairs to send them off because he did not know how to face them. So after confirming that they had left, Jiang Hai came downstairs. In the villa, Delina and Marian went to send Chi Jie and Chi Ya off, leaving only Prawalton and Cheryl Lee. Seeing Jiang Hai coming down, Prawalton also went up to him. She completely ignored Jiang Hai's slightly melancholy gaze. She wrapped her arms around his neck and took the initiative to kiss him. "Doesn't your wife know about what happened between you and other women? Why did you send them away?" After their lips parted for a long time, Prawalton looked at the sad Jiang Hai and couldn't help but say with a smile, Hearing his words, Jiang Hai could only shrug, because there were some words that he couldn't say. After all, these things were quite embarrassing to talk about. It doesn't matter. You have been in a state of use for the past few days. I thought I was going to come in vain. Your wife will come tomorrow, but today, you belong to us. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't answer, Prawalton didn't care. After chuckling, she directly pushed Jiang Hai onto the sofa. Compared to the bed, she preferred other places. As for Cheryl Lee, after watching the flames of war reignite here, she also joined the battle group. She liked Prawalton, but she also liked Jiang Hai. For that kind of thing, she also enjoyed it. The flames of war reignited in the living room of the villa. In the evening, Prawalton and Cheryl Lee also entered Jiang Hai's room. This was the first time they did this kind of thing in Jiang Hai's room, but if they didn't get used to sleeping on the jade bed, it would really be a trap. The next morning, when Jiang Hai left, they also got up, but they didn't wake up. They were woken up by the bed and went back to their rooms to sleep. After instructing Aphrodite and the others to help clean the room, Jiang Hai drove his battle shield and headed to New York. On the way, Jiang Hai casually bought 2 burritos to fill his stomach and rushed all the way. At about 10 o'clock in the morning, he arrived at New York's LaGuardia Airport. Looking at the time, there was still more than an hour before the flight arrived, so he wasn't too late. So Jiang Hai sat in the car and played with his mobile phone. Unknowingly, more than an hour had passed. As Chi Li's phone rang, Jiang Hai also answered the phone. After asking about the location, Jiang Hai closed the door and walked into the waiting hall. But as soon as he came in, he saw 4 women standing together and walking out. When he saw who these 4 women were, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel a drop of cold sweat on his forehead. Jiang Hai knew these 4 people. Chi Li, this was inevitable. The person next to her was her assistant. Until now, Jiang Hai didn't know her name. Jiang Hai was also familiar with the other 2 people, Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshan. Jiang Hai couldn't understand why they were here. Oh, you're here. Are you tired? Seeing the 4 people coming in front of him, Jiang Hai smiled and greeted them. Although he was surprised why Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi came, since they were here, Jiang Hai couldn't ask here, so he went forward to pick up the luggage. But with this, he awkwardly found that he didn't know who to pick up. Whether it was Feng Yunshan, Ai Xiaoxi, or Chi Li, they all brought a big bag of luggage. Seeing this, Jiang Hai was really embarrassed. Go and get a trolley. Looking at Jiang Hai's embarrassed look, Chi Li couldn't help but glare at him. This guy likes to flirt. This time, I'll let him see the disadvantages of having too many women. But fortunately, she just looked at Jiang Hai awkwardly for a while, then she helped Jiang Hai out of the awkward situation. Oh. Hearing Chi Li's words, Jiang Hai immediately ran to a distance and pushed a trolley over. He loaded the luggage of the 4 people into the trolley, then pushed it out of the airport. After leaving the airport, they naturally took their luggage down and carried it themselves. They came to Jiang Hai's car. After putting the luggage in the car, the 5 people also sat in the car together. Although Jiang Hai's battle shield was a standard seat for 5 people, because the car was really big, Chi Li sat in the front passenger seat, and the 3 people sitting behind her didn't feel crowded at all. However, Jiang Hai still felt that the atmosphere in the car was quite awkward. He wanted to find something to say, but he found that he didn't seem to have anything to say. It was better to stay silent. In the end, it was Chi Li who spoke first. She looked at Jiang Hai and said with a serious face, "Can you talk about the progress on your side?" Hearing Chi Li's words, Jiang Hai also had a rare opportunity to speak. "Oh, progress. I went to Moses Adams the day before yesterday, and the company has been registered. It's called Tenglong Company, and the brand is also called Tenglong. It's mainly to promote my beef and seafood and form a brand effect. The registration capital is $3 million, and it should be approved soon. Do you have any opinions or suggestions?" Hearing Chi Li's words, Jiang Hai also had a rare opportunity to speak. "Soaring Dragon, although it's a bit old-fashioned, it's not bad. Now that the company has not come down, everything is just talk. After the company comes down, you have to decide what your company will do. In fact, in my opinion, there is no special need for you to promote your brand. Pierre Walton, I have the sea market, we can scrape your meat clean, and we can also buy your seafood. So what you said about promotion is not necessary. You just have to ensure the effect of your brand and your company. I think it's better to do transportation. After listening to Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li thought for a moment and then said to him. Chapter 681. Transportation. Listening to Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai fell into contemplation while driving. Yes, transportation. After you win the award, the necessary publicity is necessary, but you don't have to worry about your transportation. Although I don't want to admit it, Pralton will solve your problem of mass transportation. Haishang Supermarket and I are enough to solve your remaining supply. In the future, even if you raise more and more cows, we can still eat them. But there is one thing that we can't earn, and that is the money for logistics. Qi Li heard that Jiang Hai listened and explained to him. Not all companies were like Pralton, which had many planes, whether it was Qi Li or Haishang Supermarket. They didn't have private cargo planes. If they wanted to distribute the beef everywhere, Haishang Supermarket needed to use the Walmart Group's channels. In this way, they would naturally lose some money and the initiative of the beef. Similarly, Qi Li also needed to spend money to transport the beef back from the United States. Not only was it expensive, but most importantly, it was time-consuming. It was not worth it. Therefore, instead of handing this business to others, it was better to hand it over to Jiang Hai directly. Jiang Hai's company didn't need to do anything else. It only needed to deliver the beef to domestic or Haishang Supermarket on time, and it could also take some private jobs. The money for private jobs was enough for the normal operation of the company. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but touch his chin. This might be a good idea. Jiang Hai was already a little tempted, but after going back, he had to discuss it with Pralton and Zhang Dihai. Pralton definitely wouldn't use Jiang Hai's logistics, but Zhang Dihai could. And if he didn't use it, then Jiang Hai's logistics company would only deliver the beef to Qi Li. It seemed that the loss outweighed the gain. It's possible to set up a logistics company. We'll discuss it when we get back. But the problem is, I don't know how to start a company. It's such a small company. You can't possibly come and take charge of it. What should I do? After thinking about it, Jiang Hai felt that this thing was quite reliable, but he still didn't understand the person in charge of this company. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li smiled. Come, let me introduce you. This is Jing Jin, my assistant. She has been with me for many years and is quite capable. This time, I brought her here mainly to let her work in your company. If you agree, she can help you manage the company. With a smile, Qi Li pointed to the somewhat absent-minded assistant behind her and said to Jiang Hai. It was the first time Jiang Hai knew that the assistant was called Jing Jin. He didn't pay attention before. Following Qi Li's finger, Jiang Hai also glanced through the rearview mirror. Maybe she heard Qi Li's words. Jing Jin also turned her head, looked at Jiang Hai, and nodded gently. Let's talk about it when we get back. But looking at her, Jiang Hai didn't say much, because Jiang Hai didn't have a good impression of her. When he was with Qi Li, this girl was always in his way. Although she didn't humiliate him in front of his face, Jiang Hai still remembered the look in her eyes. For Qi Li's sake, Jiang Hai didn't want to lower himself to her level. However, it was impossible for him to have a good impression of her. Now that he wanted to hand over his company to her, Jiang Hai had to think about it. Jiang Hai didn't mind. Hearing Jiang Hai say this, Qi Li also chuckled. She knew the conflict between Jiang Hai and her assistant, but she had no choice. First, she completely trusted her assistant. Second, she also needed to arrange someone in Jiang Hai's new company. This was not because she was worried about Jiang Hai, but because she was worried about other people. She was very clear about Jiang Hai's character. As for the company, after he set it up, he would probably leave it there and no longer care about it. If he found someone he didn't trust, it was likely that he would take the company away. So even if it was for Jiang Hai, she had to let Jiang Hai keep Jing Jin. Soon, Jiang Hai changed the topic. In the middle of March, New York and Boston were pretty good. Although there were still a little points, most of the land had been exposed. New seedlings were growing, and the roadside trees were budding. Everywhere was lush, and it was really beautiful. Jiang Hai talked about his newly bought cattle and the seafood he had salvaged. For a while, the atmosphere in the car was very good. A few hours later, Jiang Hai's car returned to Winthrop's manor. After arriving at the manor, Jiang Hai stopped the car and helped them carry their luggage into the villa. As soon as they walked in, they saw Pralton, Cheryl Lee, Delina, Marion, and Azalina in the villa at this time. "Hey, my darlings, how are you?" Looking at the 5 people in the house, Chi Lee first nodded to Pralton and Cheryl Lee, then smiled at Azalina. She then walked to Jiang Hai's 2 daughters, Delina and Marion. She hugged the 2 daughters and said with a smile. Because they had seen each other more often, Delina, Marion, and Chi Lee were also familiar with each other. Although they didn't call her mother, they also smiled and chatted with her. On the other hand, Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunchen were a little stupefied because they didn't know Pralton and Cheryl. Most importantly, they couldn't speak English. Among these foreigners, only Delina and Marion could speak some Chinese. Azalina only knew a little about it, so she stood there awkwardly. Fortunately, Azalina was very helpful. She pulled them to sit down and used her simple Chinese to make the 2 girls gradually relax. As for Jiang Hai, seeing that there was nothing to do here, he took their luggage and arranged rooms for them. Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunchen were going to stay in the same room where they stayed last time. Although people came and went in Jiang Hai's house, the rooms were very fixed. This was because there were a lot of rooms. The last time they came, they stayed in this room. But just as they were about to arrange a room for Chi Li and Jing Jin, Chi Li stood up and threw her luggage into Jiang Hai's room. This action was clearly a declaration of sovereignty. Everyone couldn't help but be surprised. However, Chi Li appeared to be very calm. After throwing away her luggage, she sat down and started chatting again. As for Jing Jin, she went to the last room. It could be seen that she was still very unsociable. It was understandable. These women had some kind of relationship with Jiang Hai, but she didn't. It was very awkward for her to stay here. While they were chatting, Jiang Hai also called Old Master Zhang Dihai. Recently, Jiang Hai often went to China, so he rarely went to Old Master Zhang's small supermarket to buy things because most of them were sent from China. However, the relationship between the 2 didn't break. A while ago, Jiang Hai went to get some tea leaves. But speaking of which, it was almost the Qingming festival. Jiang Hai's tea leaves should be the first batch. Thinking about the tea leaves he planted, Jiang Hai was a little excited. He didn't know how they would taste. Jiang Hai was afraid that these tea leaves would be blown by the wind and frozen by the snow, so he specially planted them in a warehouse. The temperature was adjusted to the best standard. The soil used was also the most fertile water here. Moreover, he specially watered it with water that was filled with Jiang Hai's spiritual energy. He hoped that the taste of these tea leaves could satisfy Jiang Hai. The topic was digressed again. Jiang Hai called Old Master Zhang Dihai, not to exchange pleasantries, but to tell him about his establishment of a company and that his company was going to do transportation. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Zhang Dihai agreed on the other side. For him, transportation was also a headache. Although Walmart's channel was good, it was really troublesome. Not to mention the money, this was inevitable. Although Jiang Hai's transportation would be cheaper, it also had to be charged. However, everything had to be done according to the time of Sam's Club, which made him a little depressed. For example, when he went there, sometimes the meat in his store was sold out, but the meat in Sam's Club was not sold out, so he had to wait. When the meat in his store was not sold out, but the meat in Sam's Club was sold out, then they would come in. It was really troublesome. If Jiang Hai could be responsible for the transportation, it would naturally be better. It could also ensure freshness and time. Thinking of this, Zhang Dihai agreed instantly. This was also a good thing for him, so he was very happy. After getting Zhang Dihai's consent, Jiang Hai was relieved. During dinner, Jiang Hai also explained the situation in the restaurant. When Pralton learned that Jiang Hai wanted to do transportation, she did not object. Instead, she nodded gently. In her opinion, Jiang Hai's transportation was still very good. Just like what Chi Li and Zhang Dihai said, Jiang Hai's transportation was indeed beneficial to them, but it was not good for Prowalton and Walmart. Originally, they could still receive Zhang Dihai's money, but now Prowalton's heart was not with Walmart. So when she heard that Jiang Hai wanted to do logistics and transportation, she agreed. She also told Jiang Hai what he needed. Transportation was naturally needed to do transportation. When it came to transportation, the first thing that came to mind was a car. But to be honest, a car did not matter. Because if it was close, whether it was the Haishang supermarket or Chili, they could solve it by themselves. It was not like they did not have a car. Prowalton's transportation was a plane. To be exact, it was a cargo plane. If you wanted to quickly transport the goods to major cities without smelly, a plane was the best choice. Although there was ice, the ice could only last for 7 days. Frozen beef could not be sold at a high price. Speaking of cargo planes, Jiang Hai really did not know much about it. Fortunately, Prowalton was very clear about it. The so-called cargo plane was the cargo version of a large and medium-sized passenger plane. The biggest difference between a cargo plane and a passenger plane was that there was an F on the model of a cargo plane, which represented a cargo plane. And because of the greater load, it could only take off and land in large and medium-sized airports. It could not take off and land in small airports. In other words, if Jiang Hai wanted to buy a cargo plane, he needed to go to the nearby Boston airport to rent a runway and a hangar there. In addition, he needed to buy a flight route to major cities in the United States. He also needed to talk to the customs so that he could ship to Huaxia. These things were very troublesome. Jiang Hai felt a headache when he heard it, but Jing Jin listened very carefully. She had also been in contact with logistics in China, but these things were mostly done by train, car, or plane. But she was not very clear about the specific operations. Since Prowalton knew more about it, she would humbly ask for his advice. While they were talking, the night fell unknowingly. Qi Li and the others had been on the plane for more than 10 hours. So everyone looked at the time and went to bed. Naturally, Jiang Hai went back with Qi Li. Although they had just separated not long ago, as soon as Qi Li returned to the room, she pushed Jiang Hai to the door and kissed him heavily. "Hey, you have been on the plane for more than 10 hours, and there are still a few hours in the car. Aren't you tired?" After their lips parted for a long time, Jiang Hai looked at Qi Li, who still wanted more. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. Why does this woman not follow the routine at all? "I'm definitely a little tired, but if I don't enjoy myself with you here, I can't sleep." Licking her lips, Qi Li said with a smile. Then, without giving Jiang Hai a chance, she kissed him on the lips again and began to take off her clothes at the same time. Not long after, the two rolled onto Jiang Hai's white jade bed, and the battle began. An hour later, the wind and rain gradually stopped. Jiang Hai also lay on the bed with Qi Li in his arms, letting Qi Li's head rest on his arm. Jiang Hai was also slightly panting, and Qi Li had already closed her eyes. Although she was not asleep yet, her breathing gradually stabilized. "Phew, I really want to stay by your side every day. I'm gradually addicted." Leaning in Jiang Hai's arms, Qi Li whispered. "Then you can stay." Hearing her hand, Jiang Hai's other hand also wrapped around her armpit, pressing one of her breasts and whispering. Feeling Jiang Hai's action, Qi Li couldn't help but pat his hand. Glancing at Jiang Hai, Qi Li closed her eyes again and said bitterly, "If you're not satisfied, then go find Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunchen. But remember, come back when you go to bed. If I don't see you tomorrow morning, you're dead." Chapter 682. By the way, I don't quite understand. Did they want to come over this time, or did you bring them here? When he heard Qi Li talking about Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunchen, Jiang Hai couldn't help but ask with some doubts. He had been curious about this matter for a whole day. "I called them here." Listening to Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li also replied. "But why?" Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai was even more puzzled. What kind of trick is this? "No reason, I'm willing." However, Qi Li didn't explain her meaning, which made Jiang Hai a little puzzled. "Okay, go quickly, remember to come back and sleep." Looking at Jiang Hai's confused look, Qi Li kicked him, then closed her eyes and began to sleep. She was really tired. Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai scratched his head, then slowly walked out of the room. After gently closing the door, Jiang Hai was still a little puzzled. He didn't understand why Qi Li did this, but Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshan were also related to him. He couldn't let them wait for too long, so after hesitating, Jiang Hai still went to Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshan's room. When he came in, Ai Xiaoxi had just finished bathing, but Feng Yunshan hadn't finished yet. You know, the water in Jiang Hai's room is hot spring water. Soaking more is beneficial for the body, so Feng Yunshan likes to soak more there. Seeing Jiang Hai walk in, Ai Xiaoxi was stunned for a moment, then she didn't care about it. She sat on the bed while drying her hair, and looked at Jiang Hai with a smile. Looking at her, Jiang Hai was a little embarrassed. Aren't you going to accompany Qi Li? At this moment, Ai Xiaoxi asked him with a smile. She told me to come over and accompany you. Scratching his head, Jiang Hai said to Ai Xiaoxi, somewhat at a loss. This Qi Li is really something. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Ai Xiaoxi patted the seat beside her for Jiang Hai to sit down. She sighed. This Qi Li really gave her a lot of pressure. In fact, Jiang Hai didn't understand why Qi Li called them over. However, Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshan thought about it and roughly guessed that Qi Li was doing this mainly for 3 goals. Firstly, she wanted to signal to Jiang Hai that she was pregnant. She didn't care about what women Jiang Hai had outside, but she wanted Jiang Hai to come back every day. Secondly, she wanted to show Ai Xiaoxi and the others that mistresses should have the awareness of being mistresses because they couldn't help Jiang Hai. Thirdly, and most importantly, she wanted to show Jiang Hai that she was smart. She wanted to tell Jiang Hai that she would be his think tank. This could be said to be killing 3 birds with 1 stone. She had to admit that when it came to playing mind games, Jiang Hai was really far behind Qi Li. Forget it, don't think about it anymore. Let me check if you still have the ability to accompany us. Ai Xiaoxi shook her head. She was still too young. Compared to Qi Li, Ai Xiaoxi felt that she was still lacking a lot. However, this didn't mean that she would admit defeat. Ai Xiaoxi glanced at Jiang Hai and smiled as she leaned on Jiang Hai's legs. She released the part that Jiang Hai had just exercised and gently teased it with her hand before swallowing it. Feeling Ai Xiaoxi's movements, Jiang Hai also closed his eyes and enjoyed it. Sometimes, for a man, having more women wasn't a good thing, unless you had a strong body like Jiang Hai. Not long after, the war drums sounded again in the room. The battle between the 2 armies reached its peak once again. Just when Jiang Hai defeated Ai Xiaoxi, Feng Yunshan heard the noise outside. After taking a bath, she looked outside and couldn't help but chuckle. Then she joined the battle. It was already around 11 o'clock in the evening when Jiang Hai left the room. But just as he left the room, he found that Prawalton and Cheryl Lee's doors in the distance were opened. At this time, Cheryl was standing in front of the door, hooking her finger at Jiang Hai. Prawalton was also standing behind her, but his hands were grabbing 2 vital parts of Cheryl's upper body and constantly changing their shape. In fact, the meaning of this was self-evident. Although his feet were already a little light, Jiang Hai couldn't be biased. He gritted his teeth and went into the room. When Jiang Hai appeared in the corridor again, it was already past 12 o'clock. He yawned. To be honest, Jiang Hai was already a little tired. Just as he was about to go back to the room, he suddenly found that in the hall on the 1st floor, someone was holding a phone in a daze. After frowning and looking at it, Jiang Hai found that this person was none other than Jing Jin. What is she doing so late at night? Scratching his head in confusion, Jiang Hai thought for a moment and went downstairs. Hello. Just as Jiang Hai hesitated whether to ask what was going on, the phone in Jing Jin's hand suddenly rang. Then, with Jiang Hai's hearing, a young male voice came from the phone. Hello, it's me. After hesitating, Jing Jin said to the man on the phone. Oh, you still called me? I thought after you went there, you went to play with your black brothers. At this time, the male voice on the phone couldn't help but say a little frivolously. Hearing this, Jing Jin's expression was not good. What nonsense are you talking about? I'm here to work. Hearing the voice on the other side, Jing Jin said with a face full of anger. Work? Is work more important or am I more important? Shouldn't we be one? Who allowed you to go to work? Hearing Jing Jin's words, the man on the other side roared angrily. Hearing his voice, Zheng Jin couldn't help but be speechless. He didn't know what to say. "You'd better make a decision yourself." Hearing that Zheng Jin was silent, the person on the other side couldn't help but snort coldly. Then he directly hung up the phone. As for Zheng Jin, after the other party hung up the phone, he seemed to have lost his soul and was somewhat powerless. "Cough. Sorry, if you have something important to do, I can arrange for you to return to China as soon as possible." Looking at Zheng Jin sitting there powerlessly in the dark night, Jiang Hai thought for a while, then coughed dryly to remind her of his location, and then said to her. From the call just now, it was not difficult for Jiang Hai to guess that there should be something wrong with Zheng Jin's other half. If because of his own affairs, the other party's relationship was delayed, then Jiang Hai felt that it was a little unnecessary. "Oh, it's okay, I'll go back to my room first." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Zheng Jin was stunned for a moment. Then, she turned around and glanced at Jiang Hai. After that, she turned around and walked directly to the second floor and returned to her room without saying anything. She looked like she didn't want to say anything more. Jiang Hai also scratched his head. He had to listen to Qi Li's opinion on this matter. He turned around and returned to his room on the second floor. At this time, Qi Li had already fallen asleep. Jiang Hai also took off his pajamas and went to bed. Just like that, he hugged Qi Li and fell asleep. The next day, Jiang Hai was woken up by Qi Li's hair. When he opened his eyes, he found that Qi Li was lying on top of him at this time, using her hair to sniff his nose. Feeling her movements, Jiang Hai woke up in the morning, and his big brother also woke up. Realizing that her lower body was different, Qi Li's pretty face couldn't help but blush, but she didn't dodge. Looking at her appearance, what else was there to say? The flames of war ignited in the room again. When the flames of war on Jiang Hai's side were extinguished, it was already past 9 in the morning. "Are you a dog? Can't you eat enough?" Lying on top of Jiang Hai, Qi Li gently patted Jiang Hai's chest and then said softly. At this time, she was sweating all over, and her body seemed to have no bones. She was soft and had no strength at all. "Oh, that depends on what you eat." Touching Qi Li's smooth back, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li buried her head deeper. She liked how Jiang Hai treated her, she really liked it. "By the way, what's the matter with Zheng Jin? When I came back last night, I found her on the phone. It seems that the other party is her boyfriend or someone else. Didn't her family allow her to come? Then let her go back." Looking at Qi Li, Jiang Hai remembered Zheng Jin's matter last night, and couldn't help but ask Qi Li. Jiang Hai didn't want to keep a person who didn't have any intention to help him, and he still had to pay her a salary. "Sigh, this matter is indeed a little troublesome, but we can't let her go." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li couldn't help but sigh, and then told Jiang Hai. Speaking of which, Zheng Jin was also a bit unlucky. After she graduated from university, she was recruited by Qi Li and worked at the grassroots for a year. Because of Qi Li's relationship, she was directly promoted to the top. Therefore, she wasn't very proficient in some things like interpersonal relationships, but she was indeed good-looking and capable, so there were indeed a lot of people watching her. Not only were the people in the group watching her, but also the people outside. Moreover, they were right next to Qi Li. Originally, Qi Li could also watch a little, but because she spent more energy on Jiang Hai last year. Zheng Jin found a boyfriend without paying attention. This boyfriend was a small boss of their cooperative company, and the two secretly dated for about 3 months. Zheng Jin came over and said that she was pregnant. Originally, this boyfriend didn't want the child, so naturally, he didn't want to marry Zheng Jin. However, because of Qi Li's pressure, and because his parents also thought that Zheng Jin was a good person, and could be considered as an internal staff of Qi Li's. If any news was leaked, it would be a good thing for their family, so they forced this man to marry Zheng Jin. However, after getting married, this guy still went out to drink and have fun. Zheng Jin once went to his party and he beat Zheng Jin up. Moreover, he beat her so badly that she had a miscarriage. After Qi Li found out about this, she directly cut off the cooperation project with their company, which almost made their family bankrupt. This small boss had no choice but to beg Zheng Jin to forgive him, and Zheng Jin was also a fool, so she forgave him just like that. After that, Qi Li kept a close eye on Zheng Jin, but this guy still didn't change his character. On the other hand, Zheng Jin was like a punching bag, completely resigned to her fate. This made Qi Li really angry, so this time, after Jiang Hai said that he wanted to start a company, she transferred Zheng Jin over. She made this decision because she wanted to make Zheng Jin give up and divorce that man. However, now it seemed that Zheng Jin didn't give up so easily. After hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai could only chuckle. Although he thought that he was also a scumbag, he didn't seem to be scumbag to this extent. At the same time, he also felt a little pity for Zheng Jin in his heart, but a person who was pitiful must have something to hate. Thinking of her attitude toward him back then, Jiang Hai's pity instantly disappeared. A wicked person would be dealt with by another wicked person. Now, he could only say this. However, just as Qi Li said, Zheng Jin couldn't go back, so Jiang Hai didn't care. Let her stay here. He would see if she could do this job. If she couldn't, then he would find her an idle job. After all, he still had to give face to Qi Li. After talking about Zheng Jin, Jiang Hai and the others also got out of bed. After breakfast, Jiang Hai first took Qi Li and the others to play around in his manor. He also specially went out to sea. The next day he went to Winthrop and then went to Boston on the third day. Jiang Hai's company went through the formalities very quickly. After all, Moses Adams was involved. Also, because he wanted to buy a plane and so on, Jiang Hai added an additional $100 million to the investment. Anyway, the money wouldn't bear any children in the bank, so it didn't matter if he invested it a little. With the addition of the money, Moses Adams went through the formalities even faster. The license, tax certificate, business permit, and so on were all completed in 3 days. Then, Jiang Hai rented the 17th floor above Moses Adams' lawyer building as the address of his company. Then, it was time to recruit employees, customize a plaque, decorate a company, and so on. At this time, Qi Li completely delegated the power to Zheng Jin. It turned out that Zheng Jin's workability was indeed not bad. These things were handed over to her in an orderly manner. Although she was unfamiliar with the place, she had already bought the tables and chairs that afternoon, plus the design, and contacted the construction team. According to her estimate, they could finish the renovation in less than half a month at most. Then, they just had to put the tables and chairs, hire employees, and after 3 weeks, they could officially start business. Jiang Hai was very surprised. This girl was really quite efficient. In that case, he just left the matters here to her. At the same time, Jiang Hai also rented an apartment for her in the company. After all, she had to travel around Boston. It would be inconvenient if she didn't have a place to stay. Chapter 683. Hey, your taxes here are too scary. Walking out of the tax bureau, Qi Li naturally held Jiang Hai's arm and then said unhappily. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled. He couldn't deny it. The taxes in the United States were indeed too heavy. Just the federal tax alone is daunting enough. Fortunately, Jiang Hai earns a lot more than that. Well, the wool comes from the sheep's back. I pay more money, so my status here is higher. Looking at Qi Li's pouting mouth, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. Jiang Hai's words were completely correct. The biggest difference between the United States and Huaxia was the difference in social status. In the United States, it was a gold standard world. Rich people were everything. If you paid high taxes, you would naturally have a reputation in the local area. After all, the salary of the police was the money you paid in taxes. You, as a taxpayer, were quite a dazzling existence. Even when you accumulated wealth to a certain extent, those in the ruling party or the opposition parties would come to rope you in, hoping to get political donations. Therefore, in the United States, as long as you didn't evade taxes, you would be the guest of honor of all the politicians. No one would dare to do anything to you. Just like Jiang Hai, although his relationship with the upper echelons of the United States was still zero, in Winthrop, he was the local tyrant. Of course, the premise was that he paid all the taxes. In the United States, the most terrifying organization was not the FBI, CIA, etc., But the tax bureau. Countless tycoons were imprisoned. The biggest crime was tax evasion. Jiang Hai's identity was Hua Xia, so he was particularly careful in this regard. The taxes he paid every year were calculated by 3 accountants hired by Moses Adams. Except for the jewelry he sold, all of his normal income had been declared for tax, even the 1 million yuan from selling the fish. However, even though Jiang Hai was doing well here, if he were in Hua Xia, he would still have to tuck his tail between his legs. This was because Hua Xia's social status was based on official status. No matter how much money you had, it was useless. This was because your land belonged to the country. If the country wanted to take it back, it could be taken back. If some officials took a fancy to it and said they wanted to take it back, they could still take it back. At most, they would give you some compensation. However, no one knew how much of this compensation would be left. Moreover, in Hua Xia, being an official was the best way out. No matter how rich a businessman was, he could not withstand a single word from an official. The deputy section chief who destroyed a family and the deputy section chief who exterminated a family was not a joke. Of course, existences above the hall level were not allowed to appear here. Jiang Hai didn't want to be sealed for no reason. Therefore, in the book, the highest rank that appeared was the division level. However, it was still very easy for a division-level official to deal with a billionaire. Well, just take it as easy. Anyway, Jiang Hai did not dare to return to China to develop. He was really afraid that when he woke up, his manner would become someone else's. This was the difference between the official status and the gold standard. The gold standard looked more red and cruel. It was like a pack of wolves. If you want to survive, you have to find food and eat other animals. When you become the strongest wolf in the pack, you will be the wolf king. The official status was like an official who was herding a flock of sheep. In his eyes, these sheep were treated equally. If he liked any of them, he would help them. However, they were still a flock of sheep. For the rich, the gold standard was much better than the official standard. At least they could ensure their own safety. However, for the ordinary people, the official standard was actually more conducive to governance. It was more stable, and there would be fewer conflicts in society. This was what it meant to not worry about scarcity, but about inequality. Well, Jiang Hai was a little off topic. However, now he was relieved because the biggest issue of the year was solved. Unknowingly, Qi had been with Jiang Hai for almost half a month. During this time, Jiang Hai and the others had been busy building the company, preparing the beef cattle to participate in the Texas All-American Beef Cattle Show, and dealing with the matters in the manner. Zheng Jin, who was recommended by Qi, was really good. She had learned a lot after being with Qi for so many years. Her fluent English made it easy for her to live here. In addition, with Jiang Hai's influence in Boston, at least Zhang Dihai and Moses Adams would definitely take care of her. Under such circumstances, Zheng Jin's efficiency was really high. It was as if the things in China didn't affect her. She set up the company, renovated the company, bought tables and chairs, met the employees, and so on. It could be said that Zheng Jin easily arranged these tasks in an orderly manner. After watching her for a week, he found that she was really good at this. Jiang Hai signed a contract with her. Jiang Hai hired her to be the CEO of the Tenglong Company. There were only 2 main categories of work: publicity and transportation. Publicity of the beef and seafood produced in Jiang Hai's Tenglong manor. Transportation was responsible for passing these things through security and transporting them back to the capital of Hua Xia to be handed over to Qi. She could also send them to the big cities in the United States, where there would naturally be people from the Shanghai supermarkets to receive them. She mainly paid for things like planes, flight routes, and maintenance. She handled these quite well. As for her salary, Jiang Hai gave her $1 million a year. Although it wasn't particularly much, one could become a general manager in some domestic companies. $1 million a year was actually just a basic figure. After all, it was only $6 million and they had to pay taxes. But what was really valuable was the 10% dividend and the company's shares. Jiang Hai owned 100% of the company's shares, but she could enjoy 10% of the dividend. This was also her goal. According to her estimation, if the company did well, It was impossible for it to lose money. After all, most of the business had already been contracted out. So even if it didn't make money in a year, it would at least make a net profit of $30 to $40 million. 10% was $3 to $4 million. This was not a small sum for Jingjin. Whether it was for money or for Qili, she was quite serious about her work. Except for an accountant, Jiang Hai was too lazy to take care of everything else. In Jiang Hai's eyes, she was a complete professional. After handing over the company to Jingjin, Jiang Hai and the others put more effort into the manor. This half a month might be the happiest half a month for Qili since her father passed away. Because Jiang Hai would hug her to sleep every night. Although he would leave for a while at night, when she fell asleep, Jiang Hai was by her side. When she woke up, Jiang Hai was also by her side. Without the pressure of work, she played with Jiang Hai in the manor every day. They would go to see the cows, ride horses, plant vegetables in the greenhouse that had been built with Delina and the others, or go to the vineyard to talk to Aphrodite and the others about the ripening of the grapes. Then, they would drink a glass of wine under the grapevines. If she was tired of playing on land, she could play in the sea. She could go fishing, catch fish, dive and catch lobsters. She could also ask Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshan, who were almost mute here, to go shopping in Winthrop. To be honest, Qili really didn't want to leave anymore. She wanted to buy some native products or check out the seasonal clothes, but a phone call pulled her out of this idea. She could stay here, but she couldn't watch her father's company collapse or fall into the hands of others. This was the last thing she wanted to see. Because of this, after Qili accompanied Jiang Hai to pay his taxes, it was almost time for her to leave. But this time, Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshan wouldn't leave. This time, they were already mentally prepared to stay by Jiang Hai's side. If Qi Jie and Qi Ye came back, then there would be 7 people in Jiang Hai's villa. It seemed to be getting more and more lively. Recently, they had been learning English from Delina and Marion. Seeing their changes, Jiang Hai was also very happy. Time sometimes passed by unknowingly. In the blink of an eye, Qili had been in Jiang Hai's villa for 3 weeks. And today she was officially leaving. But when she came, there were 4 people, but when she left, she was the only one left. Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshan decided to stay in Jiang Hai's villa. They didn't want to go back, but at least they didn't want to leave now. Zheng Jin had become Jiang Hai's ZO and signed a 1-year work contract. The visa was also easily completed with the help of Jiang Hai. So this time, she didn't want to leave. Qili also didn't want her to leave. After all, it was very troublesome to stay in China. You have to take care of yourself. Outside the departure hall of New York's Guilati Airport, Jiang Hai and Qili stood opposite each other. Looking at Jiang Hai in front of her, Qili said with some worry. She didn't know when her heart had been completely tied to Jiang Hai. Looking at Qili, Jiang Hai hesitated for a moment before saying, "You too, if you feel anything wrong, contact me immediately. I can go back to China or pick you up. Don't forget, I'm still your husband." Looking at Qili, Jiang Hai hesitated for a moment before saying, "Heh, you still know that you are my husband, but unfortunately, my husband is a womanizer. I think you have eaten almost all of the women in your manor. In the beginning, you lied to me that you didn't have that kind of feeling for Aphrodite and the others. A rabbit doesn't eat the grass near its burrow. I think you have eaten all of them now." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, although Qili's face showed a trace of displeasure, her heart was already blooming with joy. Husband, these 2 words from Jiang Hai's mouth, it was really not an easy thing. But she still had to accept it and say what she should say. She didn't know how she could tolerate Jiang Hai having so many women. Maybe it was to make up for it, or for something else, but Qili found that she really didn't care about these things. Compared to those women, she was more concerned about whether she could stay by Jiang Hai's side. This was more important. "I'm leaving. Don't miss me too much." Seeing that the plane had begun to check in, Qili knew that she had to leave. She glanced at Jiang Hai, took a deep breath, and then hugged Jiang Hai tightly. After kissing Jiang Hai's lips, she said in his ear. Then she picked up her luggage and left quickly. She didn't look back because she didn't know if she would be willing to leave if she looked back at Jiang Hai. Her life here with Jiang Hai and the people here with Jiang Hai were constantly destroying her strong woman side. She didn't know if she would have the ability to go back to the capital and be her own iron-blooded president after one look back. But in Qi Li's heart, a seed had been planted. It seemed that it was time for her to consider retirement. Once she found a trustworthy person and handed the company over to him, she would be able to look for Jiang Hai. This was a good thing. As he watched Qi Li's figure enter the airport, Jiang Hai's heart felt a little empty. In fact, even though Jiang Hai was living a good life here, he was actually a little lonely. He didn't lack friends. Everyone in Winthrop was his friend, but when these friends were linked to benefits, friendship was no longer as pure. Of course, this was only because Jiang Hai was busy. Jiang Hai didn't lack women either. Just like Qi Li said, Aphrodite and the others were indeed related to Jiang Hai. But their relationship was more of a superior and subordinate relationship, not like an equal boyfriend and girlfriend relationship. Ai Xiaoxi couldn't give him this, Feng Yunshan couldn't give him this, Pra Walton couldn't give him this, and even Qi Jie and Qia couldn't give him the same feeling as Qi Li. Qi Li was Qi Li, Qi Jie was Qi Jie, Qia was Qia, and Ai Xiaoxi was Ai Xiaoxi. Every woman by Jiang Hai's side was unique and irreplaceable. If anyone left, he would feel a little empty in his heart. I'm still not strong enough. Sooner or later, I'll have all my women by my side. Since I have the ability, if I don't start a harem, won't my efforts be in vain? With a self-deprecating smile, Jiang Hai, who had always thought of himself as a salted fish with no dreams, had his first dream sprouted because of Qi Li. It could also be said that it was an ambition. Although this ambition was not serious, it was more or less considered a main line. After sorting out his emotions, Jiang Hai drove back to the manor. The next day, he had to go to Boston. After Qi Li left, Qi Jie and Qia would be coming back. They had already settled the matters in Miami. The huge White Research Institute had been sold by Qi Jie. Anyway, Qia's illness had been completely cured, and they would officially return tomorrow. However, Jiang Hai couldn't stay with them for too long because he had to leave soon. This time, his target was Texas. When they landed on the ground, she will definitely let Jiang Hai, maybe let Jiang Hai know why the flowers are so red. After all, Jiang Hai is indeed talented in that aspect. However, it's not a problem to let Cheryl know the consequences of offending her. As the three of them chatted, laughed, and hugged each other, the plane was about to land at San Antonio's airport. Today was April 3rd. There were still 3 days before the Texas All-American Beef Show, but the venue was already set up. After getting the exact information, Pra Walton used the plane dedicated to Sam's Club to take Jiang Hai and his cattle to Texas. This plane was a huge plane, an Airbus A380. The whole plane was changed into 2 parts, the cargo cabin and the cabin. There were only 10 seats in the cabin, and all of them were better than the first-class seats. The seats could be adjusted 180 degrees and could be used as a bed directly. Moreover, it was very wide, and the seats could be moved left and right. In addition to the decoration here, it was very luxurious. To be honest, Jiang Hai had some thoughts of buying such a plane. If he took such a plane back to China, it would be very comfortable. But the premise was that the money he spent was also very comfortable. Although the cargo cabin at the back was called a cargo cabin, it was actually not bad. At least the seats were comparable to those in the first-class cabin. This time, Jiang Hai came to participate in the competition to make a name for himself, not to open up a market. Therefore, he learned a lesson from last time and only brought 3 cows this time. However, these 3 cows were all carefully raised by him this month. These 3 cows were all left over from last year. They were fat and strong, and full of spirituality. Of course, this so-called spirituality was not related to intelligence. It's just that these cows look very smart, that's all. As for the 3 cows, Jiang Hai also brought 3 cowboys with him. They were Robbins Garcia, Burke Dollar, and Bell Lester. Originally, Philemon Turner should have come, but considering Jiang Hai's safety outside, he specially sent Bell Lester this time. Of course, there was also a professional bodyguard, Knerson Peters. Athena Vesborio did not come, because the manor still needed to be protected. At this time, the 4 big men were sitting in the cargo cabin. As for the passenger cabin, only Jiang Hai and the other 2 were there. Naturally, Jiang Hai could do whatever he wanted, and these 2 would cooperate with him very well. As the tires came into contact with the ground, the huge plane couldn't help but shake. Robbins Garcia and the rest who were already prepared waited for the plane to slowly stabilize before they immediately walked into the cow enclosure to calm the cows who were a little panicked due to the tremors. The good thing about cows was that they were very quick to calm down. Soon, the 3 cows calmed down. Jiang Hai and the others also got off the plane. The airport had already prepared a car for the cows, which was parked behind the plane. Jiang Hai and the others also got off the plane. After helping to put the cows into the car, they left the airport through the cargo passage. Jiang Hai and the others also left in the car prepared by Pralton. Their goal was the venue this time. Although they could stay in a better hotel, don't forget that Jiang Hai had to stay with the cows. Pralton and Cheryl had to stay with Jiang Hai. If they came to San Antonio, they would have a chance to be alone with Jiang Hai. If they went to another hotel to stay, it would be a waste, especially since Pralton had tortured her along the way. When they arrived at the venue, Jiang Hai and the others showed their registration information. Then the people here arranged a place for them to graze the cows and an exhibition hall. After that, Jiang Hai and the others went to a hotel prepared by the organizers. Although it was only a 4-star hotel, it was still very good. Jiang Hai spent a lot of money, so the location of his exhibition hall was good. The room he stayed in was also a suite. After entering the room with Pralton and Cheryl, Pralton pushed Jiang Hai onto the bed. It was obvious what they wanted to do. It was afternoon when they arrived, but when Jiang Hai and the others came out, it was already night. According to Jiang Hai, they were going to find something to eat, but Robbins Garcia and the others were unwilling to leave. After all, the exhibition was coming soon. The cows were also very important, so only 4 people went out in the end. Jiang Hai, Pralton, Cheryl Lee, and Jiang Hai's bodyguard, Knerson Peters. It was easy for the 4 of them to go out. Jiang Hai rented an SUV and drove to the distant holy city, San Antonio. In fact, for people in China, there had always been a misunderstanding about San Antonio. It was mainly for the NBA. This was because people in the NBA always said that San Antonio was a small city. The basketball market was small, and there was no economy. In the eyes of people in China, San Antonio might not be as big as Boston, Atlanta, or Oakland. But in fact, this was all nonsense. San Antonio was a big city in the United States. It was quite a big city. Texas was the largest state in the United States besides Alaska. The largest city in Texas, Houston, was the 4th largest city in the United States. As for the holy city, San Antonio, it was the 2nd largest city in Texas and the 7th largest city in the United States. Other than New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and Houston, San Antonio was actually not afraid of anyone. Philadelphia, the 6th largest city, and Phoenix, the 5th largest city, were actually on par with San Antonio. Boston? If it was a metropolitan area, then San Antonio was far behind. However, they were talking about cities, and they were using cities as a unit. Boston's urban area alone was not comparable at all. San Antonio's history could be said to be very long. It was the earliest Native American settlement in the United States. In 1691, Spanish explorers settled here. In the middle of the 18th century, it developed into the largest Native American settlement in Texas. In the middle of the 19th century, Texas and Mexico fought, including the Battle of the Alamo. At that time, the fight was very tragic. Mexico was very strong at that time. Texas was defeated, but later the Americans stood up. After Wu Wu took over the territory of Texas, the Mexican-American War started. The United States annexed Texas, and then there was the Civil War. This place became a famous cattle trading center and border city in the United States. To be honest, this city had a long history, but there were not many places that attracted people. There were only 2 reasons. One was the architecture of the Japanese people. After all, it was occupied by the Spanish in the beginning, so a large number of Spanish-style buildings were preserved. Later, it was occupied by Mexico, and many Mexican buildings were preserved here. There were very few American buildings here. However, there were many such exotic buildings. Second, the Holy River, which the people of San Antonio were proud of. The banks of the river were green and could be said to be world famous. Around the river, there were restaurants, hotels, cafes, tourist souvenir shops, theaters, museums, and other buildings. However, all the buildings mentioned above were located in the river valley, which was lower than the city's street level. In other words, looking from the city, one could only see the river valley full of trees, but there were no traces of people. It was quite spectacular, and it gave people a strange feeling when they walked in. Besides these two things, there was nothing else to see. Second, the recruitment mainly depended on the humanities. The Texas Folk Festival, beef show, rodeo competition, and so on. Every year, the San Antonio Livestock Show and rodeo competition were held here, but it was in February and lasted for 3 consecutive weeks. In February, Jiang Hai was at home, so naturally he could not come. This time, Jiang Hai participated in the livestock show held in Texas. Compared to the one held in San Antonio, the one in Texas was more popular. It was open to the whole country and lasted for a week. There were 2 kinds of competitions, the cattle competition and the rodeo competition. Both competitions started on the first day, then went through 3 days of auditions. On the 4th day, the top 16 were decided. On the 5th day, the top 8 were decided. On the 6th day, the top 4 were decided. On the 7th day, the best cattle and the best rodeo were decided. Compared to the voting in New York, a team of experts was formed here. They went into the exhibition hall to look at the cattle and score them. Therefore, there was no need to set up a TV and hang ribbons like in New York. It was very troublesome. Jiang Hai and the others came here mainly to get cattle. They did not care too much about rodeo. Robbins Garcia and Burke-Dollar came here to compete when they were young. They had won honors, so they could not participate again. As for Bell Lester, it was not that the 2 old guys wanted to criticize him, but with his current ability, it was impossible for him to pass the auditions in such a competition. One was from Texas, and the other was from Montana. The rodeos in these 2 places relied on these things to make a living. Therefore, when it came to picking up sheep, riding cattle, training horses, and so on, Bell Lester was at least 10 times better. Therefore, from the beginning, Jiang Hai's goal was the beef show, not the rodeo competition. Of course, it was still a bit early to say this. After all, they had to wait 3 days. Jiang Hai, Pra Walton, Cheryl Lee, and Knerson Peters went straight into the city of San Antonio. Chapter 685. Hi boss. Give us 4 steaks. Hurry up. The game is about to start. We still have to drive there. The 4 people who walked in were probably 4 fans. They didn't look very old. They were about 30 years old. They were wearing the Spurs black jerseys. They shouted loudly as they walked in. Jiang Hai looked at them when he heard their shouts. The 4 of them walked to a table and began to discuss tonight's match. Is there a Spurs game tonight? Jiang Hai didn't pay much attention to NBA games. Although he would watch it sometimes, most of the time he preferred to watch American TV series and variety shows. For example, there was a famous American TV series called Slave of Desire and another one called Spartacus. They were all very good American TV series. There were no scenes that went against the socialist ideology. They were American TV series that anyone from 99 years old to people who had just learned how to walk could watch. Moreover, they were filmed quite well. However, he used to like basketball, so when he saw these people talking about the Spurs, Jiang Hai's interest was piqued. Of course, boss. Tonight is the regular season game between the Spurs and the Raptors. San Antonio will win. A white man turned his head and looked at Jiang Hai. He might have heard Jiang Hai's words. After hearing his words, many people in the restaurant started shouting. It could be seen that the Spurs had an unusually high reputation in the local area. Actually, this was understandable. Ever since the Spurs were established, they had won a total of 5 championships. Especially after 1998, they had never disappointed anyone. After choosing Duncan, they won the championship in 1999. In 2003, they defeated the Lakers, who were at their peak, and won the championship. In 2005, they defeated the Pistons, who had just eliminated the Lakers' F4 powerhouse, and in 2007, they defeated LeBron James, who was at his peak. After that, they entered the playoffs every year, and slowly changed. In 2013 and 2014, they entered the finals in a row, and with a bunch of old arms and legs, they defeated the Big Three Miami Heat. At the same time, they were now one of the top teams in the league. When Jiang Hai first started watching basketball, it was because of Yao Ming of the Rockets. Later, his favorite team was the Phoenix Suns. The way the Suns played was very popular. However, during the 2 years when the Suns were at their peak, they were defeated by the Spurs. At that time, Jiang Hai didn't like the Spurs. He felt that the Spurs were a boring team. After pinning the other team to the ground, they didn't let the other team fight back. It was very difficult for him to like the Spurs. However, in recent years, Jiang Hai had become a fan of the Spurs. That smooth attack, that valiant fighting style, was indeed very likable, and so was Jiang Hai. Usually, he would just watch the Spurs play at home. Now that he was in San Antonio, he wanted to go and watch the game live. Therefore, he looked at Prawalton and Cheryl Lee. He wanted to ask for their opinions. Although I don't know much, if you want to go, we'll go. After looking at each other, Cheryl's gaze landed on Prawalton. Her meaning was to let Prawalton do as she pleased. Prawalton thought for a while. Indeed, other than going back to roll in the sheets, she didn't have any other activities at night. She had just done it in the afternoon and was still in a happy state. If Jiang Hai wanted to go and watch, then she would accompany him. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but cheer softly. Then, he took out his phone and prepared to buy tickets. The Spurs had a lot of fans, and they were all die-hard fans. The team's results were good and they entered the playoffs every year. Therefore, the loss of fans was relatively small. In addition, the team's playing style had become more and more beautiful in recent years, so the number of fans had increased. However, the football market here wasn't particularly popular. Other than key games and the playoffs, it was difficult to fill the seats with fans. Basically, it wasn't too difficult to buy tickets at any time. It was just a matter of location. Jiang Hai wanted to buy tickets in the front row, so he naturally didn't choose to sit too far behind. Therefore, he chose to sit in the first row, not far behind the Spurs bench. Naturally, the tickets weren't cheap at such a close position. The Spurs' results were there for all to see. His tickets couldn't be as cheap as those of the Bucks. After buying 4 tickets next to each other, Jiang Hai and the others sped up their eating. After eating, they prepared to leave directly. However, just as they were about to leave the shop, a group of people walked in from outside. Compared to the group of fans just now, these people were obviously the so-called successful people. They were all wearing suits and ties. The person in front kept smiling as he led the way. As he walked, he introduced the riverside. Originally, the two sides didn't know each other, so it was fine if they just walked past each other. However, the problem was that the entrance of the shop wasn't very big. The large group of people didn't seem to have any intention of lining up. They just squeezed their way in. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai, who was originally very anxious, couldn't help but frown. However, he didn't say anything. After all, this wasn't Winthrop. It wasn't his territory. For a small matter like this, it would be fine if he just let it pass. It would show that he was a person of high standards. However, if things were to pass so easily, there wouldn't be a need to describe it in detail. Among the crowd, most people's eyes were originally focused on this shop, but some people's eyes were looking at something else. For example, Cheryl Lee and Prawalton beside Jiang Hai. Ordinary men naturally have evil intentions but don't have the guts to do it. After all, they have male companions beside them. However, some people didn't care about this. So a well-dressed white man who looked about 30 years old came over with a smile. He wanted to walk in front of Prawalton, but Jiang Hai wouldn't give him such a chance. He directly blocked in front of Prawalton and Cheryl Lee. The man couldn't help but frown. However, he still didn't stop. He glanced at Jiang Hai's physique and smiled disdainfully. He was about to push Jiang Hai away. But the moment their shoulders collided, the man's face couldn't help but change. He really didn't expect Jiang Hai's strength to be so strong. Under this collision, he felt a sharp pain in his shoulder, and then his body unconsciously turned back. "Why did you bump into me?" This man really knows how to complain first. After being pushed away, he instantly covered his shoulder and looked at Jiang Hai angrily and shouted loudly. Hearing his words, the people who originally walked in were stunned for a moment, then walked to the man's side. Seeing the crowd gathering, Jiang Hai chuckled. "Want to fight?" He wasn't afraid of anyone when he fought. However, just as Jiang Hai was about to warm up, Knerson Peters stood up and came in front of them. "Step back, don't come close." At the sight of Connaisson's powerful figure, those people who had gathered around were all startled. After exchanging glances with each other, they all took a step back. Actually, their relationship was not as solid as they had imagined. They just needed to support each other. However, there was no need for them to confront this burly man head-on. Given his size, it was obviously not a good idea to find trouble with him. "Hey, you're not allowed to make trouble here. Otherwise, I'll call the police." At this time, the owner of this restaurant, or rather, the waiter, also came over, but he didn't mean to stir up trouble. Generally, when there was a conflict in China, the owner would come out to stop the fight and say something like, "We're all here to have fun. You don't have to do this." Or, "Give me some face, don't start a conflict here." Everyone put out the fire, but the American owner was arrogant. If he didn't agree with a word, he would call the police. He wasn't afraid that these people would really fight. Hearing this person's words, the people here pretended to be angry and then completely retreated. What a joke. They didn't intend to fight. What a joke. If they were injured, it would be too much of a loss. And although the man didn't seem to be dressed well, he was obviously someone who didn't lack money since he could go out with a bodyguard. "What's the matter? Jiang Hai, why are you here?" Seeing that the crowd had retreated, a person who came in first ran into the circle, wanting to be a peacemaker. But when he just walked in and saw Jiang Hai in front of him, he couldn't help but be stunned. When Jiang Hai saw him, he was also a little surprised, because he knew this person, Rosalind Cartwright, one of Jiang Hai's competitors last year. He came from the Cartwright Animal Husbandry Company. In the beginning, a man named Paul K. went to Jiang Hai's manor to pull cattle, and there was some hatred between the two sides. Later, at the beef show in New York State, this guy made a bet with Jiang Hai. As a result, he was beaten black and blue by Jiang Hai. If it was normal times, Jiang Hai probably wouldn't remember him, but it was different here. Jiang Hai just said that he was going to attend the beef show and just remembered him. He didn't expect to meet him here. It was really fate. "Why are you here? Has your position been restored?" Looking at Rosalind Cartwright, who was walking in front of him, Jiang Hai crossed his arms and said disdainfully. He clearly remembered that after this guy lost to him last year, he was directly fired by his family's company. Now it seems that he is worthy of being his son. In just a year, he has been restored to his position. Ahem, you don't need to worry about that. What? The New York Beef Show can't satisfy you anymore, so now you're eyeing the National Beef Show? Let me tell you, the National Beef Show is not as easy as the New York Beef Show. There are more strong people here than you think. Hearing Jiang Hai mention last year's incident, Rosalind Cartwright's face couldn't help but change, and he said gloomily. He thought about it and figured out the purpose of Jiang Hai's coming here. It was nothing more than the same as his, to attend the National Beef Show. Thinking of this, his gloomy face became even gloomier. Originally, the Cartwright Company's business didn't cover the territory outside the northeast corner of the United States, so they didn't care about the National Beef Show. First, they couldn't beat it. Second, it was because the beef that they carefully prepared might not be able to cover the market after the competition. At that time, it would be a waste. In addition, the competition here was too fierce. Therefore, in their opinion, it was better to take over the New York Beef Show than to waste time on the National Beef Show in Texas. But who would have thought that Jiang Hai would come out last year and completely ruin their wishful thinking? The reason why he didn't attend the New York Beef Show this year but came to Texas to attend the livestock show in Texas, was to avoid meeting Jiang Hai again. But he didn't expect to meet Jiang Hai here. Needless to say, he knew what he was here for. It must be for the National Beef Show. Thinking of Jiang Hai's beef, he couldn't help but have a headache. This time, it might be really troublesome. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai shrugged. He was quite confident in his beef. I hope you can get a good result. Let's go. Glancing at Jiang Hai's indifferent look, Rosalind Cartwright took a deep breath and left with the others. Seeing them leave, Jiang Hai and the others also left. They still had to watch the competition. Do you know this group of people? That girl seems pretty good. After Jiang Hai and the others left, the person who had the conflict just now couldn't help but walk over, covering his shoulder. He looked at Rosalind Cartwright and said, "Don't give up." "Just give up?" The guy. "Well, it's nothing. That guy raises cattle in Boston, Massachusetts. He's a small manor owner. The quality of the beef he raises is pretty good. He's probably here to participate in this event." After hearing this person's words, Rosalind wanted to tell him to give up. Jiang Hai was very powerful in Massachusetts, and he had a lot of personal property. If something happened to him, he would be finished. But when he was about to say it, he suddenly changed his mind. If this guy wants to find trouble with Jiang Hai, then let him go. If he succeeds, then Jiang Hai's trip will be in vain. If he can't find her, then Jiang Hai will deal with him. It has nothing to do with him, and he will have one less competitor. Why not? Hearing Rosalind Cartwright's words, the man couldn't help but touch his chin. This guy was a pervert. When he saw Pra Walton, it was impossible for him not to be tempted. Although she was taken, he could use her to loosen the soil. As for Jiang Hai, he didn't care at all. He was just a manor owner. How much money could he have? What power could he have? Just give him some channels and he would be happy. Thinking of this guy was even more certain that he wanted that beauty. Chapter 686. Do you have a grudge against the Cartwright Company? Prawalton, who was lying on Jiang Hai's chest, forced herself to calm down. She asked Jiang Hai with her eyes half closed. Jiang Hai hugged her with one hand and Cheryl Lee with the other. He took 2 deep breaths to stabilize his unstable breathing. Then he began to recall. Let's talk about this. Cartwright. The Cartwright Company is a big company in the Cartwright Company. Back then, my cowboys wanted to sell their cattle to this company. Actually, you can't blame them because they didn't know how much my cattle were worth. The people sent by this company were very arrogant. At that time, I made a bet with them to see if I could get first place in the New York State Livestock Exhibition. You know the result. Because of this bet, the company lost a lot of money. So we have a grudge. Jiang Hai smiled as he looked at Prawalton. Oh, is that so? This is a normal competition. Don't worry about them. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton closed her eyes and found a comfortable position on Jiang Hai's shoulder like a kitten. Then, she leaned against him and got ready to sleep. Jiang Hai also got ready to sleep with them in his arms. After leaving the restaurant, Jiang Hai didn't know what those people said. He went to the Spurs' home stadium and watched the Spurs games. He had to admit that the current Spurs were indeed one of the strongest teams in the league. Even the fierce Dragons, one of the top 3 teams in the Eastern Conference, were beaten by them. However, looking at the current Spurs, Jiang Hai still felt that there was a problem. That was because the Spurs lacked a true offensive all-star in their current lineup. In other words, no matter how tight the opponent's defense was, he could still score. In the past, Duncan was such a person. No matter who was guarding against him, there was no way to deal with him. However, things were different now. Aldridge's offense as the core of the 2 Dirks was not very stable. His shooting ability was still quite good against the short players inside the 3-point line, but against those muscle-bound players, his offensive ability was indeed a little weak. He was not bad at playing the 4th position, but he was still a little lacking at the 5th position. Small forward Kawhi Leonard's defense was one of the best in the league, but his offense, especially when it came to attacking with the ball, was still far from good. His hit rate for a back solo was also not particularly high, and there was still room for improvement. From Jiang Hai's perspective as a fake fan, the Spurs were a strong team. However, they were not at the level of a champion. However, this had nothing to do with Jiang Hai. After watching the game, they returned to the hotel. Of course, after returning, Immerse and Peters went to eat some supper before returning to rest together. After returning to the room, Jiang Hai, Walton, and Cheryl Lee naturally had another meal. Fortunately, Jiang Hai was not an ordinary person. If he was, he would have been done for a long time. Sometimes, Jiang Hai thought that monogamy was not only a matter of women's rights, but also to protect men and let them live a little longer. Hugging Walton and Cheryl Lee, Jiang Hai slowly fell asleep. The hotel was originally built in the suburbs, and it was a 4-star hotel. The soundproofing was very good. There was no other sound throughout the night, and Jiang Hai and the others had a good night's sleep. The next morning, they came out of the room at 9 o'clock. After washing up, they went to the hotel lobby to have breakfast. Breakfast here was included in the accommodation. Although the organizers provided accommodation, they did not provide lunch, dinner, or supper. Only breakfast was eaten as a buffet. In fact, it was called a buffet, but there was a lot of food. There were sandwiches, baked bread, and a lot of other ingredients. You could take whatever you wanted. There was fresh milk, fried eggs, sausages, ham, bacon, and fresh lettuce, kale, and other vegetables. In addition to Western food, there were also Chinese food, such as various kinds of rice porridge, soy milk, Mexican burritos, and so on. It could be said that this hotel prepared breakfast for people all over the world. As long as you wanted to eat, there was food here. Among Jiang Hai's group of 6, Robbins Garcia got up very early and went straight to the cowsheet. After all, there wasn't much time left until the start of the competition. Therefore, the cowsheet couldn't be left unguarded. In case someone was up to no good, or if there was an accident, they wouldn't have enough time to transfer more beef cattle from the manor. Therefore, there must be someone guarding the cowsheet, even at night. Last night, it was Burke-Dollar for the first half of the night, and Bell Lester for the second half. This morning, Robbins Garcia went to replace him. Therefore, when Jiang Hai and the others arrived at the restaurant, they found that there were a lot of people eating breakfast. Most of them were dressed in standard cowboy attire. At the same time, there were also some who wore suits and ties. These were the representatives or bosses of the livestock companies. Looking at these people, Jiang Hai didn't care about them. He found an empty seat and let Walton and Cheryl Lee occupy it. Then Jiang Hai and the others went to get food. However, when he just came back with food, the scene in front of him made Jiang Hai laugh. It's really melodramatic. Looking at his table in the distance, Jiang Hai lowered his head and smiled. "Boss, do you need me to send them away?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Immerse and Peters also noticed the distance. He walked to Jiang Hai's side and whispered to Jiang Hai. Looking at the fierce light in his eyes, Jiang Hai waved his hand and stopped him. "Let's take a look first." After Jiang Hai finished speaking, he walked back to his table with the food, but at this time, there was a guy sitting next to Walton. Jiang Hai also saw this guy last night. It was the guy who bumped into him. At this time, this man was sitting next to Walton, talking about something, but Walton's face was still cold. Except for Jiang Hai, she has always had this expression towards other men, but this person didn't seem to care. "Hey, you are sitting in the wrong place." Putting the food on the table, Jiang Hai pointed to the man's position and said with narrowed eyes. But the man just glanced at Jiang Hai, then turned his head and continued to talk nonsense. For example, he has a manor in Montana, how beautiful it is. He has a villa in California, next to the sea. He also has a yacht, he can sail Walton and so on. Listening to him talking nonsense, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. "Oh, sorry, it seems that this gentleman is deaf, let's go somewhere else." Jiang Hai looked at the man, shrugged, picked up the food and winked at Walton. Everyone was about to leave. Seeing that the beauty in front of him was about to leave, the man had no choice but to ignore Jiang Hai. He turned around and looked at Jiang Hai arrogantly. "Are you blind? Can't you see that I am chatting with this lady? If you are blind, I suggest you go to the ophthalmology department. Don't do these disgusting things." Looking at Jiang Hai, the man turned his butt and said slowly, This gentleman doesn't seem to be deaf, then it seems that there is something wrong with your brain. Didn't you hear me say that there is someone here? Staring at the person in front of him, Jiang Hai also smiled. He looked at him with disdain and said, "This guy really thinks he's something. Is this seat yours? Do you think there is someone here just because you say so? I also said that this place is mine. Boy, you better watch your mouth. A nouveau riche from Boston dares to pretend in our Texas. Believe it or not, you won't be able to walk out of Texas in one piece." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the man smiled disdainfully, then looked at Jiang Hai with an arrogant face. I said, "The place I hate the most is Texas. There are too many dogs here, and they don't understand human language." Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was not angry, but looked at Prawalton, waved at her, and then said with a smile, "Now that the dog is barking at you, what are you going to do?" Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Prawalton couldn't help but pick up a piece of bread with a smile, tore off a piece and put it in her mouth and chewed gently, while chuckling at Jiang Hai. "You dare to call me a dog?" Listening to Jiang Hai and Prawalton echoing each other, the man's eyes widened and he said with an angry face. Unfortunately, Jiang Hai and Prawalton ignored him. "I'm a dog lover. If a dog barks at me, I should kill it, but today I'm in a good mood, so I'm just going to drive it away." With his head lowered, Jiang Hai said softly, and when his voice fell, his hand also put on the man's shoulder. "You want to..." Feeling Jiang Hai's action, the man couldn't help but panic a little. He knew that Jiang Hai's physical fitness was not comparable to his, so he wanted to say something, but before he finished speaking, Jiang Hai's right arm instantly exerted force. He directly threw the man out. Yes, threw him out. He flew directly from the chair, almost 2 meters high, and fell heavily on the carpet in the distance. Then Jiang Hai slowly sat down in front of him. "Ah, my arm. My arm. You bastard. You bastard. My arm, it hurts, you bastard. How dare you hit me, security? Where are the security guards? If I get hit, there won't be anyone, you bastard. Who the F***ck eat?" This fall, although it wouldn't hurt him, it was inevitable that it would hurt. When he landed, the man hit his body with his hand, which made his arm hurt, but he still had a lot of energy. After he stood up with his arm, he shouted loudly. Hearing his shout, many security guards in the distance rushed over. Looking at his appearance, plus Jiang Hai's appearance, it was not difficult to see that this should be a conflict between the guests. Originally, Jiang Hai was still thinking whether there would be some kind of melodramatic thing, but he didn't expect that the people in this hotel were quite neutral. After looking at the situation, they didn't come over to say anything melodramatic, nor did they stand up for this man. They just walked in front of this man and asked if he needed to call the police or an ambulance. Their meaning was obvious. They were not going to stand up for him and find trouble with Jiang Hai. Hearing the words of these security guards, the man's face turned purple. Jiang Hai and the others sat in the distance, but they couldn't help but laugh. This guy seems to be sick and very sick. This disease is called the protagonist disease. He always thinks that the world should revolve around him. As long as others are disrespectful to him, or have a trace of neutrality, he will jump out and say that he has suffered unfair treatment. Now, seeing that these security guards didn't stand up for him, he couldn't help but jump up and curse. But he only moved his mouth. He didn't dare to do anything, and if he called the police wouldn't care. Just the fact that he harassed the other party first, Prawalton could sue him, and it was uncertain who would win at that time. He had to admit that the United States had a strong sense of law. Even if he had called the police, nothing would have happened. This guy just said a few harsh words and left. Looking at his back, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. There are really a lot of crazy dogs. "Young man, you may have to be careful." At this time, after the people at the next table finished eating, a yellow man in his 40s walked to Jiang Hai's table and looked at Jiang Hai in a friendly manner. "Oh, hello, what should I be careful of?" Hearing this man's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but immediately reply, then asked him. "The person you just kicked out is called Roland Shalater, the heir of the SSR company. His family has a high status in the Texas livestock industry." After hearing Jiang Hai's words, the middle-aged man said to Jiang Hai, At least he has to let Jiang Hai know who he offended. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also looked at Prawalton in confusion. He has never heard of the SSR company. Texas Animal Husbandry Company. We have dealt with this company before. It is indeed one of the largest companies in Texas. The first S stands for State of Texas, and the last SR stands for stock farming. Its market value is estimated to be around $2 billion. Looking at Jiang Hai's eyes, Prawalton's brain flashed, and he already found the company's situation. Chapter 687. More than 2 billion? Hearing Prawalton's words, Jiang Hai touched his chin and smiled. Animal husbandry companies worth more than 2 billion yuan. In fact, on a global scale, it was definitely not a small company. This was talking about the market value, not the total value. If he wants to acquire it, the price will inevitably be higher, about 3 billion. In the world, there were only a few companies in animal husbandry that could reach millions of dollars. Among them, the well-deserved giant in the United States was the Cargill Group. Other than that, there was no existence that Jiang Hai couldn't move. A small company with a market value of more than 2 billion can't even compare to Jiang Hai. What can Jiang Hai be afraid of them? Thank you very much, I will take care of his affairs. Since he is not afraid in his heart, he is in the medical team. Only by knowing the enemy and yourself can you win 100 battles. Jiang Hai is not a person who takes advantage of others. Since this person helped him, Jiang Hai still has to thank him. You're welcome, I see your skin color. You are Asian, right? Looking at Jiang Hai, the middle-aged man also smiled and said to him, Well, yes, I am from Huaxia. Hearing this man's words, Jiang Hai answered the question. In fact, he was also a little curious. I feel like you are from Huaxia. My name is Lu Leking, and I am also from Huaxia. Now I run a ranch in Texas. This is my wife, Huaxia Lu, and this is my son, Lu Rongshuan. Hearing that Jiang Hai is also from Huaxia, the middle-aged man here couldn't help but smile. Then he introduced the two people behind him, a very typical white woman, about the same age as Lu Leking. There is also a mixed-race boy who looks to be in his teens. At this time, he is looking at Jiang Hai timidly. Hello, brother, did you settle down here? After greeting them, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at Lu Leking. Yeah, it's not easy to make a living in China. I studied here when I was in university. After I graduated, I considered going back to China to work, but the working environment in China wasn't very good. So I took the 200,000 that my dad was going to give me to find a job and came to the place where I studied. I bought a piece of land and started working as a farmer. How should I put it? At least it's more comfortable than working in China. Listening to Jiang Hai's words, Lu Leking couldn't help but smile. But don't look at how happy he is. But Jiang Hai knew that 200,000 renminbi from 10 years ago was still worth a lot of money. At that time, he might not be able to buy a house in Beijing, but he could at least buy a good house in Bing City. He could even use 200,000 renminbi to invest overseas. He had to admit that Lu Leking was daring. Brother, you are really bold. Hearing this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but give him a thumbs up. Huh, it's not like what you said. Actually, the reason why I came here is because I studied here when I was in university, so I am not unfamiliar with this place. But little brother, are you also participating in the beef cattle exhibition? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Lu Leking couldn't help but smile. Although he didn't think that he was great, being able to gain recognition was a good feeling. Yes, I am also a farmer, but my home is in Winthrop. If you have time, you can come to my place to play. My place is near the sea. Listening to Lu Leking's words, Jiang Hai also said with a smile. Okay, when I have time. Hearing Jiang Hai's invitation, Lu Leking couldn't help but smile and said. In fact, these words were almost the same as not saying anything. In China, when I have time, I will wait for the next time, and I will wait for a while. These words were basically excuses. When I have time. When will I have time? Wait for the next time. When will the next time be? So when they say this, they are just being polite, but it is different in the United States. They will take it seriously. So after hearing the words of his father and Jiang Hai, Lu Leking didn't have any thoughts. but his wife and son's eyes lit up. To them, being able to go out and play was a very good thing. After saying goodbye to Lu Liqing's family, Jiang Hai also went back to prepare. They were going to the cowshed to take a look. Although the cows were sent to the cowshed last night, Jiang Hai didn't look at the environment there carefully. Now that it is dawn, everyone can't sleep during the day, so naturally, they have to go and take a look. As for Prawalton, she left first. Because she also has her own things to do. As the manager of Sam's Club, she not only has to give advice to Jiang Hai, but also her own business. She also had to think about her own store. Therefore, since she came to the National Beef Cattle Exhibition, not only did she have to help the Soaring Dragon Manor make a name for herself, but she also had to choose a channel to sell the meat. After all, Jiang Hai's manor only produced 10,000 cows a year. A cow weighs more than 400 kilograms of beef. That's more than 8 million pounds of beef. That's all. If it was distributed to the entire United States, it wouldn't even be enough for everyone in the United States to eat. Of course, this is just a saying. Jiang Hai's beef is not for ordinary people to eat. But for those rich people, 365 days a year wasn't enough. Therefore, Sam's Club still needed to purchase some other types of beef. Jiang Hai's Soaring Dragon Manor had high-end beef, but they also needed some mid-range beef. As for the low-end beef, they didn't need it. They could directly go to Walmart to buy it. Because of her work, she had to go to the local area to recruit her staff, and then come to Jiang Hai's place in the evening. Now Prawalton may have been holding back for too long, it is time for her to taste. She is extremely infatuated with Jiang Hai. Cheryl Lee is also quite infatuated with Jiang Hai, not to mention Prawalton. After separating from the two women, Jiang Hai also drove the car and took Knerson Peters to the cowshed. After all, there are only 3 cowboys this time, and they are divided into 3 shifts. In that case, the people will be exhausted, so Jiang Hai must come to replace them. When he arrived here, Robbins Garcia is standing in front of their 3 cows busy. Seeing Jiang Hai come over, he can't help but smile and wave, indicating his position. Jiang Hai walked over while looking at the nearby situation. He has to admit that this National Animal Husbandry Exhibition is quite good. The cowshed was completely separated from each other. It should be that when the cowshed was built, they had already considered the number of cattle each family had. Some families came here to discuss business, so they had more cattle. Because of this, their location was more remote and occupied a larger area. Some came to win awards, such as Jiang Hai. Their cows are relatively small, but they are very good. The cowshed they occupy is relatively small, but the facilities are better. For example, the shed where Jiang Hai is at this time is about 3 meters high. The whole roof is made of colored steel, the ground is made of cement, and the surrounding is also made of reinforced concrete. It is windproof and breathable. There is also a special sewage channel, feed trough, and so on. It can be said that it has everything. There is even an air conditioner in the cowshed to prevent the temperature here from being too high. On the other side of the cowshed, there is a single lounge. People can rest here at night. Jiang Hai walked in and took a look. The lounge is not big, about 3 or 4 square meters. In addition to a single bed, there is only a table and a few chairs. But even so, it is quite good. At least there is a place to rest. When Jiang Hai came, Robbins Garcia was there brushing the cows. Cows are not like horses, so they don't need to be brushed all day. Horses will have problems if they are not brushed for a few days, but cows are not brushed under normal circumstances. Jiang Hai's manor is the same. However, these cows are here to participate in the competition. Brushing their hair will make them more beautiful. At least in terms of appearance, it will add some points. Looking at Jiang Hai walking around, Robbins Garcia can't help but smile and say, "Hey, boss, you're here." "Well, I'm here. The environment here is not bad. It's much better than the New York Beef Show." Hearing Robbins Garcia's words, Jiang Hai also said to him, to be honest, he quite likes the environment here. Yeah, after all, this is Texas, a paradise for cowboys. When I was young, I also came here to explore. I have to admit that with my skills in Winthrop, Boston, or even Massachusetts, I really don't respect anyone except Burkdollar. But here, my level is only slightly better than a beginner. Shaking his head, Robbins Garcia said with some emotion. Texas and Montana, a paradise for cowboys, is not a joke. Purely in terms of skills, the strength of the people in these two places is indeed terrifying. Even Robbins Garcia has to admit defeat. According to him, in Texas, there are at least 8,000 if not 10,000 cowboys of his level. They dare not show off here. However, Jiang Hai didn't intend to hire any cowboys here. This was because the cowboys in Texas were notorious for their bad tempers. Perhaps it was because they were located on the border, but their customs were quite tough. If the Russians were a fighting nation, then the Texans were also half a fighting nation. It is very common to fight over a disagreement here. They are very xenophobic and are unwilling to leave their hometown, even if their hometown is very poor. Under such circumstances, if Jiang Hai wants to recruit people, those with real skills will not come. Moreover, Jiang Hai was quite confident in Robbins Garcia. This skill was enough for him. Jiang Hai was more interested in him, not because of his cowboy skills, but because of his management ability, which was a rare ability. After visiting the cowshed here, Jiang Hai also stayed here and chatted with Robbins Garcia. At night, Jiang Hai has to deal with Walton and Cheryl. In addition, he is the boss. He will not come at night, but he is still willing to come and take a look during the day. If Robbins Garcia wants to sleep, he can go back to sleep. If he wants to walk around, he can also walk around. For people watching is better than one person here. Robbins Garcia also knows Jiang Hai's thoughts. Although he and Jiang Hai have an employer-employee relationship, the two of them have a good private relationship. Therefore, they had a lot of topics to talk about. While talking, Jiang Hai also talked about Du Feimin's manner. But after listening to Jiang Hai's words, Robbins Garcia frowned. In fact, using a helicopter to herd cattle is not good news. Because the sound of the helicopter is too loud, the cattle will be frightened after hearing it. Even if they are used to it, the noise will have some effect on them. They won't get fat. Without fat, there will be no marble veins. Just relying on our grass. Looking at Jiang Hai, Robbins Garcia said with some worry. Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai was also stunned. He only saw the spectacular scene there, but he really didn't think about this problem. The helicopter is indeed very loud. He felt a little uncomfortable listening to it, let alone those cows. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai can't help but want to call Du Feimin. His first boat of grass has been transported. If the helicopter doesn't produce marble-veined beef, then Jiang Hai will lose more than he gains. It's better to call and inform him. Teach, you really don't know how to pretend to know. But just as he was about to call, a voice suddenly came from the opposite side of the cowshed. Jiang Hai and the others looked at the source of the voice and saw a few cowboys standing at the door of the opposite cowshed at this time. The voice came from one of them. Seeing Jiang Hai and the others looking over, the cowboy couldn't help but curl his lips in disdain. "Boy, what did you say?" Robbins Garcia's face was a little embarrassed when he was called a pretender. He has been herding cattle for decades, and now someone said that he is pretending to know? How can this be? Robbins Garcia picked up his pipe and knocked it gently. Robbins Garcia looked at the people in front of him and said, "Cowboys are never afraid of trouble, even if the other party has more people than them." "Old man, I said you are pretending to know." The cowboy here is also a calf who is not afraid of tigers, so he directly retorted, "Okay, Dundee, don't bother with the layman." Hearing his words, the cowboys around him also said with a smile, "What do you mean? Pretending to know when you don't know? Then tell me, what did I say wrong? Otherwise, this matter won't end here." Looking at the young cowboys in front of him, Robbins Garcia squinted his eyes and said with a stern face. For him, face is very important, especially in front of Jiang Hai. He can't bear it. Robbins Garcia stood up and said to the people in front of him, "Let's go." Robbins Garcia said sternly. Chapter 688. What can you do if you're not done? Foreigner, this is Texas. What can you do? Looking at Robbins Garcia with disdain, the man said proudly. He had to admit that the people here were really despicable. In fact, Racial discrimination aside, they had an inexplicable sense of pride for their hometown, especially these cowboys. In fact, being proud of one's hometown was quite a good thing, but there was no need to be so proud. Anyway, Jiang Hai couldn't stand it at all. Like I said, Texans only know how to move their mouths. Looking at these people, Jiang Hai also stood up, patted Robbins Garcia's shoulder, and said to him. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the faces of the cowboys on the opposite side changed. Okay, I'll tell you and let you be convinced. After thinking for a while, the man just now couldn't help but walk out and look at Jiang Hai and Robbins Garcia with an arrogant face. They also knew that they couldn't fight here, otherwise, they would be disqualified. Since they couldn't fight, they would directly show their strength and let these laymen know what they were capable of. The place you said used a helicopter to herd cows is a plain, right? There isn't much grass, but it's very open and quite hot. Looking at Jiang Hai, the young cowboy couldn't help but say. Hearing his words, although Jiang Hai was a little disdainful of him, he also recalled. Indeed, Du Feimin's ranch was the same as what he said. It was a plain, after all. It was transformed from an oasis, so there were grasslands, but not a lot of them. After a few years, it would be much better. The area was also very large, and in the desert, it was naturally quite hot. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai nodded. He didn't say these things just now. It seemed that the cowboy in front of him really had some skills. These are the necessary conditions for using a helicopter to herd cows. Because it's very open, the sound of the helicopter can't be reflected, so the sound isn't as loud as imagined. In addition, people who generally have the financial resources to use helicopters to herd cows will generally install some sound-absorbing steel around their ranch. These steel will absorb the sound and transmit it underground, so the sound of the helicopter won't be particularly loud. At most, it's a dozen decibels louder than a car grazing. The cows can completely withstand it. Looking at Jiang Hai's appearance, the cowboy couldn't help but talk to Jiang Hai. Now that he heard his words, Jiang Hai compared them. It seemed that the sound of several helicopters on Du Feimin's ranch was not much different from the sound of the helicopter on his ranch. Of course, people would feel uncomfortable listening to it. Seeing Jiang Hai's reminiscing look, the man smiled disdainfully and then continued. The most important thing about using helicopters to herd cattle is that it's fast. Because the pasture is too big, after the cattle are released, they will look for food everywhere. If they keep running around like this, the pasture is too big, and the cattle will easily get lost and die of thirst and anxiety. Using helicopters to herd cattle can gather the cattle at any time, and when they feel that they are about to drink water, they can drive them to the water source. This centralized management is convenient and saves a lot of trouble. The most important thing is that using helicopters to herd cattle is very easy. 5 helicopters can herd 1,000,000 cattle, and this only requires a dozen or so flying cowboys. If they were replaced with ordinary cowboys, at least a few hundred people would be needed, or even 1,000 people would be needed. This is a huge expense. Hearing this person's words, Jiang Hai and Robbins Garcia couldn't help but look at each other. Jiang Hai definitely didn't understand, but he felt that this person's words were very powerful. On the other hand, Robbins Garcia thought about it carefully and felt that what this person said was actually right. After all, he knew a lot more. Do you understand? Layman. Looking at Jiang Hai and Robbins Garcia's contemplative look, the cowboy laughed disdainfully. Young man, you're right, but you haven't considered the prerequisite. That is, the cows we want to raise have marbled patterns. Like what I said earlier, no matter how soft the sound is, the cows will still be frightened. Also, when the cows are moving too fast, the fat content in their bodies will decrease and become muscles. How do you solve this? Looking at the cowboy's disdainful smile, Robbins Garcia picked up his cigarette again and said to him while filling it with tobacco. TSK, you guys really can't be that amateurish, right? Marbled beef needs to be raised carefully. As you said, driving helicopters to raise millions of cows, this is mass farming. You want to raise marbled beef? Uncle, you must be dreaming. Hearing Robbins Garcia's words, the young man couldn't help but sneer, then said with a look of disdain. The whole world knew how terrifying the price of beef was when it was expensive. For example, Japanese Wagyu was really expensive to the point of making people's hair stand on end. As for the method of breeding and even the breed of cattle, some capable people could get it. But why were these cattle not famous outside of Japan? The main problem was the method of breeding. Everyone knew how to raise a Wagyu into a superb breed. Drinking red wine and massaging, these things were known to all. But almost no one knew how to do this. Those top-notch Wagyu were all products raised with such precision. How much did the labor cost now? If they did this, although the beef was expensive, a single cow really couldn't make much money. It might not even be as profitable as raising cattle in batches. Otherwise, no one was stupid. Since they knew how to raise cattle to make money, why didn't they do it? Wasn't it because it wasn't worth it at all? Now that he heard Jiang Hai and the others say that they wanted to raise marbled beef, the young man couldn't help but speak disdainfully. It's obvious that this kind of kid hasn't seen the world. Let's go, what's there to talk about with them? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai said to Robbins Garcia. This was considered as revenge for his mockery just now. But it was obvious that some people had to endure if they were insulting you, but if they were insulting them, then they couldn't. When the young cowboy heard Jiang Hai's words, he was instantly ignited and directly jumped up. You too are amateurs. How dare you say that I haven't seen the world? I've been playing on the ranch since I was 6 years old. It's been 18 years now. Last year, I just won the Texas Cowboy competition. You say that I haven't seen the world? The young man pointed at Jiang Hai and the others and said loudly. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was really stunned. This guy really had some background. The first place of the Texas Cowboy competition was very valuable, but unfortunately, his personality was not very likable. 6 years old, 18 years old, that is to say, you are now 24 years old. Didn't your father teach you how to talk to people older than you? Looking at the person in front of him, Jiang Hai chuckled, then looked at the cowboy in front of him and said word by word. You bastard, what are you talking about? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the cowboy's eyes narrowed and he looked at Jiang Hai with a vicious face and said, I'll repeat it again, I said that you have no upbringing. Looking at the young cowboy, Jiang Hai also took a step forward and said condescendingly, You yellow monkey, I think you are looking for death. Listening to Jiang Hai's words, the young man couldn't help but shout loudly. You white pig, let's see who is looking for death. Hearing these obviously racist words, Jiang Hai's face darkened. It was useless to talk to these people. He dared to scold him, so Jiang Hai naturally had to scold him back. At the same time, he clenched his fists. F***, this is Texas. But this white pig ignited the fire of war. These cowboys opposite were all white. Without saying anything, they directly rushed out of the cowshed, clenched their fists, and wanted to fight with Jiang Hai. Now they didn't care about the rules here. They just wanted to teach Jiang Hai a lesson. But unfortunately, before they had time to get close, Enchanting Peters had already rushed up from behind. Although he was also white, he didn't mind Jiang Hai's words. Looking at the fiercest cowboy, he didn't say anything and punched him. With a loud bang, the man was instantly knocked to the ground by Enchanting Peters. When the people behind saw this scene, they couldn't help but be stunned and then looked at Enchanting Peters in horror. This man was not small, about 1.85 meters tall. Because he often heard it, his body was also a pile of muscles, but at this time, he was knocked down by Enchanting Peters with one punch, which made them quickly calm down. What are you doing? At this time, a group of security guards in uniforms ran over from a distance. There were surveillance cameras in the vicinity. If anything happened here, the people in the distance would know. At first, they thought it was just a normal quarrel, but they didn't expect it to be a fight. Seeing the security guards coming over, these people became excited again. They took a step forward and shouted, but no one dared to rush forward again. What's going on? After separating the two sides, a security guard looked at the people on both sides with a headache and asked. These security guards were not the police. They were only here to maintain order. They did not care about anything. Looking at the scene in front of them, they knew without a doubt that it had something to do with the local culture in Texas. Racial discrimination in Texas was quite serious. Even if it was explicitly stated that such behavior was not allowed, there were still many people who would do so. As the saying goes, the law cannot punish the majority. If you want to live peacefully here, people of color more or less have to learn how to compromise. But outsiders, like Jiang Hai and the others, were different. They only came here for a short period of time, so no one would spoil them. Now looking at the situation, the security guard guessed that the cowboys here should be bullying strangers again. But it doesn't mean that he will care. He just wants to make sure that there is no conflict between the two sides. These 3 foreigners actually dared to call us white-skinned pigs. Looking at the security guard captain's words, the cowboys here couldn't help but shout with some excitement. In Texas, no one dared to say that to them. Hearing the words of the cowboy, the security guard captain also looked at Jiang Hai with some surprise. Then what do you mean by yellow-skinned monkeys? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai snorted coldly and said slowly. As soon as he heard Jiang Hai's words, the security guard captain's heart skipped a beat, just as he thought. Okay, I can't do anything about this. What do you think? Do you want to call the police? Patting his forehead, the security guard captain said helplessly. It's better for him not to get involved in this matter. Call the police? As soon as they heard these 2 words, Jiang Hai and the cowboys all quieted down. The cowboys were quiet because they didn't want to call the police. Moreover, they were the ones who started the trouble first. There are surveillance cameras here. If they call the police, they won't be in a good position. As for the insults, no one here recorded it, so who knows who said it. As for Jiang Hai, if someone dared to scold him in Winthrop, they would definitely call the police. But this was Texas, and the most important thing was that Jiang Hai came here to participate in the competition. If he called the police and delayed the competition, then the gains would not make up for the losses. But this was Texas, and Jiang Hai came here to participate in the competition. So he glanced at the other party, waved his hand hatefully, and went straight into his cow sheet. The cowboys on the opposite side were not going to call the police. Seeing that Jiang Hai left first, they also shouted a few words, but then they all returned to the cow sheet. Seeing this scene, the security guard captain was also happy and relaxed. He turned around and left, but these cowboys looked at Jiang Hai and the others. They couldn't help but feel angry. They were used to being tyrannical here. Now that they suddenly met someone who dared to shout at them, they couldn't stand it. We can't just take this lying down. At this time, the cowboy who was beaten first, who had just recovered, rubbed his blue cheeks and said bitterly, "This is a big loss, he won't easily swallow it." Then what do you think we should do? There are surveillance cameras here. Looking at the cowboy in front of him, the people around him also asked in a low voice. To be honest, they can't take this lying down. This is their home ground. How can they be bullied like this? Isn't this taking a dump on their heads? Aren't these guys here to participate in the competition? There are many ways to deal with them. Now let's contact the other cowboys. We must let these guys go home empty-handed. Rubbing his face, the cowboy here said with a face full of hatred. Hearing his words, the other cowboys also moved. They joined forces to resist Jiang Hai and the others. In their eyes, there was nothing wrong with this. As for Jiang Hai, naturally, he doesn't care. His goal from the beginning was not to fight with these cowboys. His vision is much bigger. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.